Good morning, everybody, and welcome to The Critical Engineer. This is the first event of a whole brand new program that we're bringing to you to help your businesses thrive in manufacturing 4.0. So we've got a fantastic lineup for you, and I'm going to tell you all about it in a few moments. But it's my great pleasure to invite Stephanie Graham, who's the Vice Principal of West College, Scotland, to officially open our event. Welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you very much. And good morning and welcome to today's Critical Engineer session. I'm Vice Principal for Educational Leadership at West College, Scotland, and we're absolutely delighted to be hosting this innovative and highly relevant event. The event is a partnership between West College, Scotland, Forth Valley College and UHI, and it's funded by the Scottish Funding Council as part of the College Innovation Fund. The Critical Engineer project is also funded by ERDF Advanced Manufacturing Challenge Fund, run in partnership with Renfrewshire Council and UFI VOC Tech Trust. The leadership panel at the beginning of today's session will reflect on their experiences of leading their organisations during the pandemic and what their organisations are doing to help SMEs. We've all been so engaged in managing and adjusting our practices throughout this COVID time, whether as individuals, employees, or leaders. I imagine, like you, our energies have been focused on just keeping things going, staying safe, meeting the huge logistical challenges to continue to operate, and in our case, offer high quality learning. It's now so important to take time out to reflect on what we've learnt, what has changed, and how to go forward in the future. Critical thinking and reflection is a key meta skill, and we're aiming to develop in our staff, students and apprentices and workforces across the region this skill. I'm not an engineer, but I do have a background in design, and I'm well aware of the importance of critical reflection and evaluation to the design process and establishing highly effective cultures of innovation and leadership. When we're all so busy, it can be really hard to find time to reflect, but time spent this way provides an invaluable opportunity to reassess, reimagine, and innovate. The busier we are, the more important this is. Reflecting collectively, sharing experiences and ideas together generates a far richer evaluative experience. And for those leading organisations, whether large or very small, developing a workforce culture of critical and innovative thinking will take the organisation forward to a successful future. I'm delighted that you found time in these current circumstances to join this event, and I really hope that you find this morning useful for yourself and for your businesses.
Thank you, Stephanie. That was a wonderful introduction to our day, and we are very much looking forward to people joining in the chat as well, and I know that you'll be watching with interest as well, so enjoy the day and thank you for that wonderful introduction. So I'm delighted to also introduce Paul Fagan into our joint presenting role today. And my name is Louise Jones, and I'll be with you throughout this event up until 1 o'clock. My background, I'm actually a learning technologist by trade, work for the Highland Council, and I'm now a project helper with the Critical Engineer project. And Paul?
Hello everyone, my name's, for those that you don't know, is Paul Fagan. I'm Head of Enterprise and Employability at the college, and I've been leading on the Critical Engineer project with our college partners, UHI and Forth Valley College, and all our stakeholders and funders. And can I just say as well, I've never played a PS4 or Xbox game in my life, but I have had to take my son's headphones so that I'm
Thank you. And I noticed, and if you're watching, you might have noticed that Paul and I are proudly wearing our lanyards. And for those of you who signed up before Monday, we hope that you got your welcome box. You'll probably notice there's something a little bit different about this event. We wanted to really make you feel like you were part of something. And to indulge us, please indulge us. We wanted to make you feel a little bit welcome and a little bit special with your own personalised welcome box. So we know you don't really need to wear a lanyard to attend our event, but we wanted you to feel part of something. There is a little bit of method in our madness. If you have a look on the back of your lanyard, you'll see a QR code. And that QR code will take you to our website resources, and everything that you'll see today will be available on our website. We have created this event not only to be live today, but it's also going to be on demand after the event. We really appreciate that there are many businesses who couldn't join us today, and for whatever challenges that we're facing in these uncertain times, we recognise that some people are nose to the grindstone and can't get away. So to be helpful, as I said, we've created this on-demand platform. So think of it as the Critical Engineer Netflix, which is free and available anytime, anywhere, and on any device at your choosing. So all of the resources will be available on our website, and you can use the code there. Now, if you don't really have any use for your lanyard, can I suggest it's very helpful with your car keys or your house keys? It's so you don't lose them. So it is multifunctional as well. The other thing that I really wanted to mention in your welcome box is that everything is sourced from Scottish manufacturers, so we're delighted to support the industry. But you'll also notice in your welcome box that you have the Critical Engineer Welcome Biscuit. And again, this is sourced from local suppliers in Scotland. We just wanted you to have a bit of fun, and also it's really important to take breaks. So we will be taking breaks throughout this session as well. So we've just put a little task in the chat to kind of get you warmed up, and we're delighted to see people that are already adding their comments in. So we asked you to describe what 3 words describe you, and I can see already the ACS induction as saying sustainable social entrepreneur, which is just a lovely way to describe yourself. That's a brand essence right there. So please do join in the chat, and we'll keep a transcript of the chat as well, because we'll be doing a summary. So a couple of other things to say about the event today. So we are really pleased to have such a fantastic lineup for you. So we do have a leadership panel where you can hear from industry experts. And this is going to be quite reflective. As I mentioned, we really recognise it's a difficult time for everyone. And it would be really comforting, we thought, for you to hear from industry leaders exactly their reflections on the current times. We're delighted that we've got the Scottish Manufacturing Advisory Service. Gordon and Alastair are going to be talking through their advice and support of how you can embrace critical challenges. The following 2 sessions, we have Sean McDougall and Ben Rouse, who are true innovators in their field, and they're going to be looking at how you can create a culture of innovation in your organisation. And Ben is going to build on that with how you can unlock a toolkit for innovation and change. We're going to round up the day with bringing everybody back, and we're going to be just reflecting on how the morning has gone. Another treat for you. We can't not say a big thank you to Brian Mathis, who has created the wonderful graphics and the postcards that you'll have seen in the welcome box that you've received. And these graphics were visual representations of what the critical engineer was all about. And Brian is following on this morning, and he's going to be capturing your reflections, your comments, and the ethos and spirit of the event in further visual graphics, which are aid memoirs that can support you as well. And we'll make sure we display some of those at the end. So we mentioned our website, but we're also on social media as well. So you'll be able to go to our Twitter page, which is the Critical ENG, all one word. We have a Facebook page, which is the Critical Engineer, facebook.com/Critical Engineer. We also have our YouTube brand account, and as I mentioned, we'll be putting videos on there too. And this is the start of something, so we're going to build on those videos. And we also have our LinkedIn organization page as well. On our website, and this is some feedback that we had from you when we contacted you to invite you to the event today, was that you really wanted some practical information about business funding and training support, such as the Flexible Workforce Development Fund. And on our website, under the resources section, you'll see some really nice interactive graphics that have links to all of the resources that you can access. And we'll just continue to build on this as well. So it is almost time to hand over to David, who's going to be convening our leadership panel today. You can read all of the bios of all of our speakers and presenters and workshop facilitators on our website. We do encourage you to have a good explore of that. And I'm delighted to see there's already 41 people watching, which is just fantastic. Paul, just before we hand over to David, it'd be really interesting if you could just tell us a little bit more about what this means to you, because in essence, this was your baby. You know, you founded it and created it. So it'd be fantastic if you could just round off this introductory session before we hand over to David. Over to you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Louise. I mean, obviously there's been, we've been involved in a multitude of sort of applications and podcasts and videos describing what it is that we're looking to achieve here. But I think if you distill it down, when we started looking at this as a college 18 months ago, ultimately it was about change. The college was looking at how we could support small and medium-sized businesses in our region, capitalise upon things like advanced manufacturing, and specifically the National Manufacturing Institute for Scotland, which is going to be built in Shannon. And it comes down to, I think, change. Businesses being able to respond to change. And what we were looking at that point was a planned roadmap for change. But as 2020 has shown us, change can be unplanned, where we have to adapt. And I think we all see that those businesses and organisations that have been most resilient are those where the workforce has bought into that adaptation and embraced change. So beyond that, I think it's about working with organisations and their people and developing their skills. And you'll hear a lot of talk this morning about meta skills, and we want to break through the sort of the language of that, and to support businesses and organisations understand what we mean by that. It's about critical thinking, it's about resilience, and it's about collaboration. And what we are really keen to do is work with businesses and focus on them and their staff. This isn't about recruitment, it's not about identifying an innovation specialist or a collaboration specialist. It's about developing the skills of their own workforce. And lastly, I'd just say that it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to learn about tools that you can take back to your workforce, whether that's virtual or real just now. And it's also an opportunity to give us that rich insight that makes sure that what we design in terms of courses, what we offer in terms of advice, and what we do with the funding that's available to companies really addresses the challenges, but also the opportunities that businesses face at this time.
Thank you, Paul. Just one last thing. We wanted people to come away today with something tangible as well. And we have created a digital badge, which is actually the badge that's on your biscuit. And we want to be able to email you the digital badge. You'll be able to put it on your work signatures or your business websites because you are part of this community. Now, you're very lucky because it's not like a conference where we're not going to let you leave the room until you filled out your feedback form. But we do have an online feedback form, and if you complete our feedback form, then we'll be able to email you your digital badge, so you don't get off that lightly. Although it's very great that you can sit there in your favorite comfy chair with your favorite cuppa and join in today, and you haven't got to travel in what is quite a storm Christoph brewing out there. So Paul, I'm just going to bring in our leadership panel, and we're going to start to have a little reflection on where people are at in the industry right now. So I am just going to remove Paul, and I will also stop sharing my screen as well. And welcome to Jim Hannigan, and welcome to Lynne O'Hare, Dr. Lynne O'Hare, and to Dr. Jacqueline Hall, and also to Rob Aitken. So we're just waiting for David to join us. It would be wonderful if you could take a moment to just introduce yourselves. So welcome to Jim. Could you introduce yourself, please? You're on mute. Oh, there you go.
Thanks, Louise. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, Jim Hannigan. My role at the moment is with NMIS as the Head of Skills Capability, charged with standing up the Manufacturing Skills Academy within the National Manufacturing Institute. Prior to that, I spent a couple of years with SDS, working with good colleague Billy Scott on what the skills proposition might be for the Manufacturing Skills Academy. And previous to that, I spent 30 years in the private sector in technical and leadership roles in heavy manufacturing and engineering. So I can have some empathy with the SME cohort, with how difficult it is to do business. Where I can't have empathy is how difficult it is to do business in a global pandemic, which I'm sure must be extremely challenging. Just to finalise, probably the three words I would associate myself in this current context is fortunate, fortunate, and fortunate, I would think.
That's a wonderful open. And Jim, and being involved in the NMIS Skills Project, that's still very much alive, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we are building at the moment in conjunction with our One Scotland partners and industry leadership groups, what we think, understanding the main challenges in the skills environment for manufacturing and how we mitigate for those around interventions with respect to traditional interventions of revised apprenticeships and degrees, but also at the moment we are trying to support in the mid term through National Transition Training Fund development, content, and supporting the Manufacturing Recovery Plan. That Manufacturing Recovery Plan is out for consultation at the moment. So again, if you get the opportunity, go on the Scottish Government website and make your feelings known about what's required around that.
Brilliant. And we can put the link to that consultation on the website as well for everybody. And next over to Jacqueline, Dr. Jacqueline Hall. It's a pleasure to welcome you to the leadership panel. It'd be lovely if you could introduce yourself.
Good morning, Louise, and thank you for having me today. My PhD was in business competitiveness. In fact, I looked at shared supply chain for SMEs. So today is very much a cause very kind of close to my heart. I represent Ingenuity. Ingenuity was formerly Semple. Some of you will be familiar as custodian of national occupation standards, for example. We are working very much at the moment using data science, kind of techniques, talent matching algorithms, looking at skills gaps, and then looking at how we build products that respond to Industry 4.0. And that green thread ever present. because recovery for businesses, I think, is about rather than recovering to.
I think we might.
And critical thinking is essential to underpin that. So thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. I think we just had a little bit of interference there, but hopefully that will pick up again. And Lynne, over to you. It'd be fantastic if you could introduce yourself.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Lynne O'Hare, and I'm the Chief Commercial Officer in the National Manufacturing Institute for Scotland. I look after our new projects and the initiatives that we deliver to help and support companies, and I have the pleasure of working with Jim on our Manufacturing Skills Academy. NMIS is an ambitious collaboration that being delivered by a broad One Scotland partnership designed to support and enable companies who manufacture in Scotland or who want to manufacture in Scotland to access the leading edge and best-in-class manufacturing technology and workforce development practices. Over the last 4 years or so, I've been part of developing the proposition for NMIS and how it will interact with the manufacturing community. And prior to that, my background is in research and development. And I'm delighted to be able to support the discussion on how the Critical Engineer programme is going to be able to support people using skills from one area applied to another, particularly in the conditions that we find ourselves in at the moment in the COVID-19, with the COVID-19 lens in place.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's fantastic, and I'm really looking forward to hearing your contribution as well. And last but no means least, we have Rob Aitken joining us from West College, Scotland. Good morning, Rob, and welcome to the leadership panel.
Well, thanks for the invitation to join you this morning. It's a real pleasure to be here. So I am Assistant Principal at West College, Scotland, as you can see from the name tag there. My portfolio covers science, it covers construction, but also pertinent to this morning, it covers engineering. Our college serves a huge geographical area to the west of Glasgow, covering 4 local authorities. Across the engineering sector, we deliver full-time education, but we also support apprenticeship development for large and small companies across the region. We also engage, really importantly, we re-engage with school pupils as well to try and build that interest in studying through into engineering. So our contribution to the local and the national economy extends from outreach activities, drawing people into STEM subjects, including engineering, feeding them through training programs, and then out to meet the requirements of the workforce, the engineering workforce in particular, across the entire region. I'm not an engineer, I'm a biologist by background, but I have a real passion for education, for social mobility, for equality in education, equality of opportunity, and that's it's a real pleasure to work at the college and to contribute to today's activity.
Yes, and it must be a very proud moment for you as well, because this event is the first of its kind, really, where we're being, you know, in a position where we're creating a community that's going to hopefully grow and grow. I see that David is here, so I'm delighted to welcome David into our leadership panel. David, you have a long and established career in consultancy and supporting not only public sector, but businesses and enterprise as well. I'm going to remove myself now. It'd be lovely if you could introduce yourself, and then I believe you have the questions for the panel. Over to you.
Thank you very much, and apologies. I don't know what happened there. I was eating my biscuit, but I'm bound to say that. My name's David Smart. I'm the director of a company called Smart Consultancy Scotland, and been doing this sort of stuff for over 20 years now, which is a bit scary. I do a lot of stuff around, primarily in a Scottish context, around employability skills and economic development, and in a variety of ways, particularly probably more with younger people and people who have particular challenges and issues in progressing in the labour market and their careers. I've done quite a lot of work over the years with the West College and its predecessor colleges in the old world, and Skills Development Scotland. And I'm very excited by the concept of the critical engineer. But the other thing I'm aware of, which I'm sure all the other panel members are aware of, is the link between theories and ideas and practice. And I think the key thing today for people involved and hopefully reflected in this session, and I'm sure the sessions to come, are that people learn stuff, but are learning it through the lens of where they are, and that people are thinking throughout the discussion and whatever they hear, and hopefully the useful stuff they hear, what does this actually mean for, you know, our current circumstances, you know, and where we might want to move forward. Because as Louise has said, today is really the start of something, and hopefully will trigger something that people will feel a part of. And we'll look back on and say this was a useful investment of time at some point in the future, because they can see things have changed and changed for the better because of it. But I'll move on now, because as people will see from these intros, which some of which I caught, but fortunately I had a bit of written background in folks anyway, and really just ask, and I'm not coming to anyone in particular, so jump in. And I suppose it's a general question that's not surprising. It's reflecting as a leader in your organisation. What's your experience of coping with the challenges of COVID times, which sadly now, when I look at this question, I've got over the last year, which is a bit scary. So I don't know who wants to kick off with that.
Perhaps I could begin, because I think I've worked across the educational sector for all of my professional life. I've dealt with buildings burning down, with student crises of one sort or another. I'd never faced a challenge like we've had since March last year, in terms of testing the resilience of an organisation and its ability to change. I mean, change is a big theme about what we're talking about today, but testing the resilience of the organisation and its capacity to act in a way which was completely unforeseen and at extremely short notice. And that's been a massive change for us, a massive challenge for us, but one that, thankfully, through the imagination and the innovation of our staff, it's a challenge that we have risen to.
I absolutely agree with what you just said there. It's been unprecedented. Sorry.
No, Lynne.
No, I was going to say it's been very unprecedented times for everyone. I mean, I think, like everyone else, we hadn't planned in March to be working on 250 sites instead of 2. You know, and if you had said to me that we would move to a full digital integrated working model in a space of 3 to 4 weeks, I wouldn't have believed you if we had been having that discussion as late as January, 2020. But we've been trying to think about COVID from a number of different perspectives. So COVID is a safety issue for our organisation. You know, how do we make sure that our people feel safe in the way that they're being asked to work, and how do we make sure that the physical facilities that we have work and things are looked after? We've been looking at COVID as a community and wellbeing issue for our staff, and we have programmes specifically targeted at how do you keep people together? What's the Zoom equivalent of standing around the coffee machine in the morning and catching up with your team? How do we still feel human and connected in the pandemic? And then we've also been looking at it as, how does COVID affect our customers and our ability as an organisation to continue to deliver for them, recognising that some companies have seen their businesses grow and explode with potential and opportunity, and some have seen their businesses dwindle and have to change and pivot on short notice. And I think, as you say, that the way that different organisations have dealt with that has been a testament right across the manufacturing sector. People have been continuing. There hasn't been a shutdown. There hasn't been a setback.
I think for me, David, just to add on what Lynne was saying there, I think what it's also highlighted is the importance of having robust risk assessment and point of work assessments to allow you to continue your operations. It's interesting that when you start to think about 2 metre distancing and masks and how you communicate with each other, the innovation that brings and how it's driven and governed by your health and safety ethos is quite fascinating, I've found, and it's just showed the real importance of that and allowing you to have continued operations, I think.
Now, education is about people, and it's about human interaction and the way together, and that's changed so significantly over the last year. And I'd agree with Lynne. We've also introduced things to support people with mental health, coping through change, because the pace of change, the way that we work, has been that it's like going from 0 to 100, because you move from Teams meeting or to Zoom meetings, and it can feel quite relentless. So helping and supporting people with coping strategies to manage that is important. We were very fortunate that we had already moved to a big period of change and technology adaptation, which made that a little bit easier for us. But you still have issues around safety, being able to go into an office to issue paper-based certificates, to at the end of qualifications, making flexibilities to enable people to continue to complete their qualifications. There's been a whole myriad of new ways and different ways that we've had to think about being creative and providing solutions for customers. You're on mute, David.
Unmute. Sorry, thinking, taking that forward, and people have started to give some examples of, specific things that organisations have done over this period to help businesses. Folk have already reflected, unsurprisingly, that it's been an incredibly difficult time. And the other thing that clearly comes into it is morale. And in a context of, hopefully things are getting better, but they might get worse before they get better. What do people see as the highlight supports their organisations have provided in that period? And I'll pick someone. I'll come to Jim first in that.
Thanks for that, David. I think, to be fair, as a group, and I'm speaking specifically around our Manufacturing Skills Academy team and how we've tried to cope with the morale issue, I think we've been very good at communicating with each other constantly, obviously knowing where the boundaries are around that. I think we've had a lot of support at the NMIS level through our wellbeing programme and the marketing team, making sure that those issues are communicated to us. There is a challenge around we're all in it together, because we are all in it together, but we're all in it together to different depths and elements and limits, clearly, because we're not all the same. So a one-size-fits-all is very difficult around morale. But from an NMIS perspective, I think we've been very positive around that and trying to communicate to people that we are here to support them as and when it's required. I'd probably Lynne would be the next best person to expand on that further, I think, David, from an NMIS perspective anyway.
Lynne, do you want to carry on?
Yeah, thanks, David and Jim. And I'm not sure that any organisation has been perfect in the last year in how it has maintained its staff morale, and ours certainly hasn't. But reflecting ahead of this morning's session, I actually think where we've done well, it's been where we've used the type of skills that the critical engineering programme embodies. I mean, the first and foremost focus, not everything that's important is urgent, and not everything that's urgent is important. Working as we are now, we've actually had to just have much more dialogue with our team and with our partners to look at what are our immediate priorities, why are they the priorities, and have they been affected? And the adaptability point, as an organisation, we employ a fantastic team, as many of you will, with an open mindset. They are able and willing to do anything that we ask them. In order to get to the ask, the communication style that we've had to use has been different. And Jim touched on how we've tried to use our marketing and communications as a sort of internal corporate comms over the last year. And a lot of that dialogue has been about asking people to do different things, but also talking about things we don't normally talk about and ways of working we don't normally do. The sort of phrase they're saying for us, it's okay not to be okay. We've had a lot more conversations about mental health and wellbeing. We've made a lot more resources available to staff, cognitive behavioural therapy programmes, focus groups, support groups that have all been launched. We've done a lot to try and promote walking meetings. If you don't have to have another Zoom call, can you within the rules and regulations of the time, which have been through different levels, could you meet a colleague in a park for a 2-metre socially distanced walk for 30 minutes? On level 3, that was a great boost for the team. And things like virtual coffee. If you would have said to your neighbour at your desk, I'm going to go to the coffee machine, do you want to stop for 10 minutes? And that can still happen. And we've just been really trying to be proactive in the communication that those things are important to keeping us all, you know, in high spirits as we go through what we're working on.
Okay. Thanks very much, Lynne. I'll come to you in a minute, Jacqueline. It's just to say to other people, if you want to post any particular questions, we might get to them just now. If not, we're logging them and we'll come back to it. So Jacqueline, anything to add?
Which reflects what both Jim and Lynne have said as well. I think that work still can be fun, and I think we are one team and we have one purpose, and we're spread out across 4 nations as well. That additionally quite challenging, but I think, you know, we've had team events, we've had sort of team conference events. We've also had the check-ins where looking after people's sort of, are you okay, as Lynne was describing. We've also looked out because there have been certain problems that have needed to be solved. Real common purpose. For example, we were invited to do something for the Vaccine Manufacture Challenge using talent matching algorithms to attract people that may be being made redundant in one area to look at perhaps a career within the vaccine manufacturing field. And that again is great for morale, because there is something so tangible and something really satisfying about thinking that you're making a difference. I think that we are in lockdown 3. There is still a long way to go. And in the beginning, in lockdown 1, there was a sort of, I think it was different. It felt different. It was. Now it's a bit like running a marathon, where you've come to the end of one marathon and you're having to suddenly run another marathon. And I think it's how we sustain that moving forward, which will be the key, because people will remember how it was for them within the recovery, and they will remember how their employers treated them through this pandemic period too.
Okay. Thank you, Jacqueline. Rob, have you anything to add?
Yeah, I think one of the things that just popped up on one of the questions is about how you sustain staff or stakeholder morale, perhaps customer morale during these sorts of periods. And I think that comes back to reaching out, understanding what your stakeholders, what the challenges are that they face, and doing your best to meet them. And from our organisation's point of view, that covers both the staff side, but also the learner side. So around about, for West College Scotland, around 40% of our learners come from 20% of that 20% of Scotland's most deprived communities. And whilst we have pivoted very, very, very adeptly towards a digital delivery model for our theory and our sort of underpinning knowledge, not everybody in those communities has access to a digital device. And so we've had to invest very heavily in the purchase and the distribution, the loan of digital devices out to students and other learners to make sure that they can engage. And that's one way in which you can make authentic the offer of support, whether that's for addressing digital poverty, mental health support, and that kind of thing. So understanding the needs and responding to those needs is one way. I think you can try and keep morale up. Virtual catch-up has just popped up on the screen as well. We have, as Lynne has said, sort of virtual coffee sessions with staff who are used to working face-to-face with apprentices and with learners, and working in communal staff rooms, working as we're communicating now from all parts of the region and across the country, working from home, often in isolation, juggling domestic commitments, as many of us will have to do. It's about understanding what those needs are and flexing around them, I think.
Okay. Thanks for that. I see a lot of comments coming in, and obviously morale is big in it, and that's coming through. With one question that I think runs through all of this, and some of the, clearly there has been enormously challenging times, and these continue. Will we come through this stronger? Will we actually look and say, that was a horrible, whatever period of time it was, but we learned an awful lot of stuff that makes us a lot better at what we do?
I'm going to jump right back on that one, and I think we're approaching the sort of 12-month mark since the pandemic started, and actually this is a great point at which to look back and reflect and think what worked, what pushed the organisation in a direction which is actually a productive direction of travel for the future, and what failed. And when we started moving to digital delivery back in March and April of 2020. There was a plethora of different approaches, drawing on the innovation and the, I suppose, the creativity of our staff base. Now, not all of those have been equally successful. Some have been easier for some staff to deliver than other approaches, and some of those approaches have meshed more closely to what our learners and our stakeholders, be they commercial partners, what they actually need. So I think it is a point of reflection now to say actually what has worked and what has been less successful, and pick those winners and take those forward as an organisation into the future.
Okay. Anyone else want to come in? Lynne, I'll come to you next.
Thanks, David. Yeah, as Rob said, it's a great time to be reflecting, and my experience is that as human beings, we tend to be able to learn from and make the best of, and the kind of look back with rose-tinted spectacles on what went well from any situation, more than we kind of suffer the trauma of having experienced it. Certainly COVID is not what you would have wanted to have to experience in order to accelerate the digital transition, open up access. I think that point about not everybody having access to digital platforms is a really key thing. We wouldn't have chosen COVID as a vehicle to deliver accelerated digital change, but we definitely can benefit from that accelerated digital change as individuals, as learners, as businesses. And I think we're trying now to focus on where we have benefited from the experience that we've had, and where we, obviously with the mitigating actions for things that are less positive. But the intent for us firmly is to help our team and our customer base learn whatever they can from the situation that we've all found ourselves in.
Okay, Jacqueline, I'll come to you next. Any thoughts on this issue of what we've learned and how we look back and say, well, this was not a period any of us would have chosen. We might have a real long-term gain from it.
Well, I think that we're living in an age of disruption, and I think that COVID is just the extreme end of shock. But I think there's going to continue to be change over the next decade, whether that be circular, whether it be big data, Industry 4.0, net zero. We are going to continue to experience change, and critical thinking and resilience are part of that journey, because the recovery moving out and beyond this period is to harness those reflective skills. It's not about going back to the way that we were. That ship has sailed. It's about how we think about the way that we move forward, and that world that we inhabit over the coming years is to feel and to look very different. The working practices, people who said, no, that can't be done that way, suddenly we are suddenly able to do things that way, because what's happened to us has placed us in this really uncomfortable position. But I think that we need to remember in this that taking people with you on the journey is very important, and the way that people respond to the pace of change and the stress that change. So I think thinking about the business, but also thinking about the people, thinking about their resilience as well as business resilience is going to be something that I think I can contribute towards.
Okay, thank you. Jim, do you, conscious Louise is on indicating times. Any additional quick comments on this issue?
Yeah, I think just a quick one. I think in line with the theme of today, it is obviously a great opportunity for some reflective practice. And I think probably if we're trying to get some positives from what's been a horrific experience, I think it's shown us in stark detail in some areas where we have gaps. Things like the digital transformation is all well and good if you're able to take advantage of a digital transformation, and people need support to do that. The example Rob gave around the availability of Wi-Fi, availability of Chromebooks, etc., illustrates that perfectly, I think. So yeah, I think as long as it's lessons learned and not lessons collated, I think we can take a lot from this.
Okay, well, thank you for all these contributions, and also hopefully folk are following the chat coming in. There's obviously lots of interesting, good stuff going on. The idea of a virtual water cooler moment, that's maybe got a bit of mileage that can be developed further. Can I thank Jim, Lynne, Rob, and Jacqueline for the contributions? I also need to specifically thank Louise for holding the fort when I was somewhere in the ether. As I say to people, this is recorded and we can reflect on the other comments that have been made. But if I could just wind this bit up and hand back to Louise. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was just absolutely inspiring, hearing from colleagues that have joined in the chat as well, all about the kind of things they're doing in their own businesses to rise to the challenges. And certainly people are seeing this as an opportunity to thrive, and we can learn so much from people sharing their feedback. So thank you, David. It's been a pleasure to have you this morning chair that leadership panel. And you're going to be back later on, aren't you, as well, because you're going to be wrapping up. You're still on mute. So we're going to have to put you in the naughty chair.
Oh, it's shocking. But me coming back for a threat or a promise. Yeah,
that'd be great if you could. Thank you, David. So as you heard, well-being is also paramount, and those virtual coffees and water cooler moments are invaluable too. So we're going to take a quick break. So in that break, please go and grab a coffee, go and grab a tea, or a gin and tonic if that's your choice, but also enjoy your cookie as well, because after the break, I'm delighted that we're going to be inviting Gordon, Leishman and Alastair Semple to join us, and they're going to build on those key themes that you've heard this morning, and we're going to be taking a greater dive into embracing critical challenges. So please enjoy the break, and we'll be back ready to start at 10 to 11. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Just a minute to go before we introduce Gordon and Alastair. So one of the things we mentioned this morning, which is obviously the key theme of today, is around skills focus. A few years ago, Skills Development Scotland issued a paper which was called Skills 4.0, and genuinely I think this was the best paper that I'd seen that summarised skills of the future, meta skills, skills 4.0, soft skills we've heard them called, but it's those things that are not the technical skills, but the skills that might be hidden. And if you go to our website, you'll see an interactive graphic which has got resources for each of the 12 meta skills, and you will be able to click on those boxes there and see all of the resources that we're putting together. It's really interesting when you think about how you might want to encourage people to display those skills in the future. And there's a lovely quote that I just wanted to highlight to everybody. And it's something that's been already mentioned implicitly this morning. And that is that, you know, it is a doom and gloom time, and people are worried that young people are not accessing their education. Businesses are worried that staff are not able to offer PD opportunities if people are furloughed. But I just love this quote from Stephen Hepburn. I wanted to share this with you as we segue into the Scottish Manufacturing Advisory Service. But isn't it about time we celebrated our golden COVID generation? We cherish and accredit their non-standard experiences, because this generation is a generation that will have to have risen to challenges. They've absorbed lockdowns, school closures, tragedies, and have mirrored almost the generation that was evacuated in 1939. Those evacuation experiences created that post-war generation of inventors, musicians, designers, politicians who look beyond the obvious to create the extraordinary. And that's exactly what we are discovering today, is that you as entrepreneurs, you as SMEs in Scotland, with this growing community that is launching today, how we can support each other in offering support and advice to recognise these skills. So there is on our website all of those resources, and there's also a short session with myself and Ian Stewart talking about them. But enough from me, I'm eating into their time. It's my absolute pleasure to hand over to, now we have Alastair Semple, and we also have Gordon Leishman, who I'm delighted are going to be introducing to you Embracing Critical Challenges. Structure, ownership and resolution. Is that the three words that describe you guys? Sounds perfect. Right, I'll remove myself. Over to you. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks, Louise. I'll stop the cam for as we go through the slides, and then we'll put the cams on at the end of the session when maybe we're doing a little bit of Q&A. So yes, hello everyone, and thank you for joining the session today. As mentioned, I'm Gordon Leishman, and I work within the Scottish Manufacturing Advisory Service, SMAS, which operates out of Scottish Enterprise. I'm joined today by my colleague Alastair Semple, also of SMAS, and between us we're going to take you through a very quick journey around what we've experienced as best practice approaches in relation to recognising and addressing critical challenges. So SMAS have been helping companies across a variety of business excellence themes for close to 17 years now. As per the slide you're seeing there, the support we offer spans both the mechanics of business improvement and the cultural shifts often required to allow sustainable improvement to happen. And that mix of proven techniques and supporting culture is a perfect way really to introduce and start to define the topic of addressing critical challenges. So let's very quickly look at some definitions first. So in the ellipse there, we have the starting premise that in every organisation there are critical challenges that arise and are identified, but which lack ownership and structure in terms of resolution. These challenges often escalate or embed themselves as a new suboptimal normal. So let's quickly make sure we're on the same page here. There could be two definitions of critical. Critical meaning very important, or critical as used in the context of critical thinking. In other words, the deployment of analysis and evaluation. In other words, a critique. Ours is essentially the second one. You could argue that first one comes into it, but essentially we're the first. And there could be two definitions of the word challenge. Challenge meaning it's challenging, it's not easy, and challenge meaning an invitation or offer to contest something. I challenge you to a duel, that kind of thing. We are mainly concerned with the first definition, something that by definition is not easy. So we've got a critical challenge, it's not easy, and it will require a level of judgment. So it's probably safe to say it's not going to solve itself. It needs some sort of method. So what we're going to show you today is a method of approach which is widely used by thinking and learning companies to address critical challenges and improve problem-solving capability. So the first consideration might be, in a workplace environment, where do these challenges arise? Where do they come from? So in his book, the A3 Workbook, Daniel Matthews set out 4 sources through which you might first come into contact with an issue. Firstly, there's issues that are sensed. So something feels as if it's not quite right or it has to be improved. Secondly, it could be measured. You already gather metrics and therefore you can see something is deviated from an expected norm. Thirdly, he mentioned there's issues that are passed on or escalated. So it could be you're tasked with resolving something that has maybe been an issue for a while. And fourthly and finally, he mentioned issues that burst into life. All of a sudden, you've got a bit of a disaster on your hands, it's urgent, and it needs some immediate response. So the burst into life challenges and the measured challenges tend to get attention. They're either urgent or they're part of your ongoing process control. So it's pretty certain they're going to be in a radar somewhere. The tricky ones are the sensed and passed on challenges. Usually they don't have a clear owner, so they sit, they increasingly become just part of the process, and they can eat away at productivity and performance. However, a positive way of looking at that same area is that they're a huge source of improvement opportunity. In fact, companies that are genuinely on top of continuous improvement are the companies that have found a way to systematically identify and address these critical challenges. Because not only does that give a performance benefit, but the organisation moves forward culturally towards one of learning, sharing, and best practice. Okay, so if we accept that we shouldn't wait until issues become ingrained into our process or urgent and burst into life, how do we start to look at challenges differently? Well, a good place to start is by routinely capturing and classifying challenges so that they have a home and so that they have an owner. So what you're seeing in the slide there is commonly described as a process disruption map. The pyramid slices there group workplace challenges by level of complexity. And it does that firstly so as the challenges can be captured and classified, and secondly so as an appropriate response can be actioned. I'll come to the percentages in just a second, but at the bottom slice of the pyramid there's the plethora of issues that arise but just need to be dealt with. They're not really classified as issues, problems, or challenges as such. So just things like fix a machine, rework a part, cover for an absence, etc. They're the just do it ones. However, the next level up are challenges that require some form of formal consideration. And these can still be relatively simple, but need a home and an owner and benefit from some knowledge of standard problem-solving tools and techniques. And Alastair is going to cover some of that ground shortly. The next 2 levels are similar, but the challenges are increasing in complexity. So we're getting to challenges that really require some form of methodology, firstly for understanding the underlying issue and then for addressing that issue. And the map recognises that some challenges and solutions may require a cross-functional approach, which can add to the complexity. So you also see in those 2 sections that the suggested approach lies in something called practical problem solving, often abbreviated to PPS. And it's practical problem solving that we're going to focus on in this session. And as you may have picked up from the percentages, the reason for that is this. It's been researched and it's now understood that around 95% of all significant to complex challenges lie in this band where practical problem solving is an appropriate methodology and tool to apply. Down at the bottom of the pyramid, you have the simple issues where you either just resolve them immediately or get them onto some form of continuous improvement tracker for routine attention. And up at the top, you have the complex issues that potentially go beyond the scope of practical problem solving and require, for example, a Six Sigma approach. Now, Six Sigma, as you may be aware, is a very detailed but effective methodology for addressing particularly complex issues. However, it's estimated that only 5% of issues or challenges come into this top category. So what we have in practical problem solving is an approach that essentially covers the rest, the other 95%. And as we'll see in a moment, it's useful to use the method for anything that goes beyond the just do it category, as that builds up a knowledge, a confidence and a comfort with the process. What we're going to do now is show you the steps involved in practical problem solving. I guess we all engage in problem evaluation and problem solving in our heads, and sometimes we document outcomes. However, what we're intending to show is how practical problem solving allows you to formalize and record the thought and evaluation process so as problem solving can become visible, systematic, trainable, and repeatable. So I hope I've started to at least sell the concept at least. Alastair is now going to take you through the model and how it's applied. Alastair.
Alastair, are you there? Hi, Alastair.
Have we got Alastair?
Not sure where he is.
He's gone and he's come off. He's certainly off mute. Alastair, you hearing us okay?
Yep, I'm
Great.
here.
Okay, I just removed myself.
Okay, so and one critical challenge addressed at least. So yep, as I was saying, and it was excellent, although you couldn't hear me. It was a thank you to Gordon. So as he mentioned, this will be an overview of the model and the application of the model. So the why and the what. This is because we don't really have time to get into the level of detail needed to explain the how. But if you are keen to get into that level of detail, the critical engineering team have launched a critical thinking course aimed at SMEs, and also SMAS have a yellow belt course where it will cover similar topics, and both will be running throughout the course of the year. So starting with the what of practical problem solving, what do we mean when we say PPS or practical problem solving? So it's an A3 template that you would use to methodically work through each of the major steps of the problem solving process, and it will be used to address challenges so that you fix them, but more importantly, so that they won't reappear again. So in case you're wondering why it's called an A3 template, it's simply because it's designed to be printed on an A3 piece of paper. And there's a number of different templates that Gordon will touch on later, but the template on the screen is representative of the major steps that they'll go through. And as to the why it's important, and as Gordon's already said, people will be going through and addressing problems in everyday life, and especially engineers who'll be solving problems and challenges as a core part of their job. And so they're going to be either doing it instinctively or explicitly, or have been explicitly taught what we're going to go through now, but they'll be doing it in their head. So the important thing is getting it out of the heads onto a piece of paper, onto the page, because that makes collaboration easy. If done well, it avoids communication errors and misunderstandings, and all that takes the potential delays out of the problem-solving process. Also, the template's structured in such a way that prompts you to consider each stage and make sure that you address them with the same level of focus, and that stops you racing ahead, which is actually where a lot of people become unstuck when they're following the problem-solving steps. So in terms of those steps and what we mean by them, they're detailed on this slide on the right-hand side. So it's moving from the problem statement through to the confirmation that the problem has been addressed. And each of the major steps are there. So different methodologies you'll see, so the DMAIC and Six Sigma and others will follow a similar methodology, but they might have slightly different names for the steps, and in some cases they might be in a slightly different order. But these will be the kind of what you'll be doing as you move through the problem solving process. The why is reflected in the funnel that you see at the center of the diagram. When you address any challenge or problems in a business, there's going to be lots of myths, lots of legends, and a lot of opinion about what are the causes and what we should do about them. So the process in the funnel is about funneling out, sorting out these opinions until only the facts remain. And so by following this process in a structured way and using the steps of the template, you make it as easily and repeatable as possible to take those myths, legends, and opinions out of the process. So that might sound a bit difficult, but it's tied to that last point. You're solving problems, you're addressing challenges to remove wasteful processes, to eliminate those steps that are consuming time, effort, and money. There's no point replacing them with another problem-solving process that consumes time, effort, and money, and you don't get that level of value from. So the template and the steps might seem that you'd be just quicker, just cracking on and just doing it. But as you can see in the examples there, written in pen, pen or pencil, it can be as simple and it can be as quick as taping the template out to the shop floor or wherever the problem is happening, getting the right couple of people around you and filling it in with pen and pencil as you go. As it says in the example, and as you can see in the example, I've got a lot more faith in a document where I see scribbles on it, lines on it, because I know it was real and I know it was followed during the problem solving process rather than after the problem solving process. So it can be as simple as that to follow. So having looked at the template and having looked at that kind of overview, what we thought we would dig into is the steps, which are, as well as being the most important, are also tend to be the steps that people either don't do well or have a bit of difficulty with. And the first step is actually one of those. So the process and step of defining your challenge and creating your problem statement. The reason this tends to be an issue is people can underestimate the importance of it, but more importantly, tend to have the assumption that everyone knows what the problem is. And so they don't spend the time needed to define it, and they just try and crack on with trying to solve it. But what the image is trying to show, different people will have different experiences of the problem, especially if they're from different areas or departments within your business. And so what will happen is everyone will be trying to solve their own problem, and they can be very different problems. And it's just like having a blindfold on and feeling an elephant. You only know the wee part of the elephant that you can see. So by doing a problem solving statement well, you're taking off that blindfold and you're taking a step back, making sure that everyone can see the elephant. So, and that's important because a problem well stated is a problem half solved. So that's the kind of why you spend time in the problem statement, what you're doing, and what you need to do is get everyone into the same habit and method of stating a problem in the same way. So the approach that we use, and it's the one that I've had the most success with, is starting with the standard. What is it? How is the task supposed to be performed? What do you expect to be happen? How long should it take? Things like that to really define, well, what should be happening, and then defining the current statement. Okay, so if that's what should be happening, what are we seeing right now? What's happening as we look at the problem currently? And then the problem is the gap between those two, and it's always important to express it as such. We expected X, we are currently seeing Y, therefore the difference is X minus Y. So it's really, and if you can get into that method of doing it, if you can get into that method of doing it systematically, you stop problem stating the solution that you're going to try and put in place before you've actually solved the problem, and other errors that can creep in if you don't follow that common methodology and that common way of getting to really express what the problem is you're trying to solve. So that's the first, if you like, that problem statement. The other areas that people can have trouble with is that they focus too much on the root cause. The reason for that is the root cause is where you're trying to get to, so that tends to be where people focus. But actually, there are 4 causes as you move through the process of addressing your challenges and solving your problems. And they're all important because they are now enable you to do different things along the problem-solving journey. And if they're all done correctly, they will save you time, money, and effort. So the best way to explain them all is to give you an example. So a defect is found in a car body, and it's identified as that came from a faulty weld. So supervisor walks back through the system until she finds the machine responsible. This is the point of cause, where the problem is happening. So a point of cause is the process step, machine, department, where the problem is originating from. If you look at that machine, if it's complicated, if it's from an area, there'll be numerous possible causes or potential causes for that defect. And so potential causes are all those that need to be investigated in order to identify which is the direct cause. So by direct cause, we mean if you do that investigation and you find out that a welding tip has been put in incorrectly, and this is causing the faulty weld, and you can define that or prove that by replacing the tip and the defect disappears, that's you address the direct cause. That is the cause of the defect, the delay, or the departure from the standard. So if you stop there, there's nothing to stop that welding tip being put back in incorrectly the next day or on the next shift. So you need to go and address the root cause. So by doing that further investigation, you might find out that team members haven't been trained correctly, or there's no clear standard in order to fit the welding tip. That's the root cause. If you remove this cause, and you will prevent the problem from reoccurring. So that's the what, if you like, what are those 4 different causes. We're now going to touch on why each of them is important. So starting with the point of cause, so the process step, machine, department, where the problem is happening. You find that cause by walking back through the process. You could use a process map for this, or you could walk the actual process. So if in this example you get a defect is found at inspection, you check back onto process 5, the defects are there, check back onto process 4, the defects are there, check back in 3, they're found there, but there's no defects at process 2 or 1. What you've done there is identified the point of cause as being process 3. Why that is important is it means that you can put in place your countermeasure just after process 3. So rather than waiting to inspection to find those defects, if as a containment action you put in an extra inspection after process 3, you stop defective work being worked on at process 4 and 5, which will end up as scrap or will need to be reworked. So you avoid wasting that time and effort, and your containment measure is more effective. It also enables you to confirm that it's an internal problem rather than a problem with the supply chain. Okay, the next cause is potential causes. So you do typically identify these through an Ishikawa or fishbone. I'm not spending a lot of time in the how, but that you would define the quality problem in the right-hand box, and then you would use the different headings, be it measurement, environment, or machine, to generate potential causes or possible causes for that error. So looking at machines, it could be that they're out of adjustment, you've got a problem with the tooling, or things are becoming old or worn. Why you do that, why you spend the time to identify multiple things that could be causing multiple potential causes, is it focuses you to avoid assuming, oh, I know it's going to be this, and jumping straight in. And it means that as a group, you can decide what you're going to investigate first. So it gives you a better chance of picking the right direct cause. And it means that you can investigate different things in parallel with different people carrying out different investigations. And if you investigate a couple of things and it proves not to be them, you're not starting from scratch. You can move on and investigate the next most likely cause. The next and final two causes are the direct cause, so the cause of the defect, delay, or departure from standard, and the root cause, so the cause that if you removed would prevent it from reoccurring, and something you can practically do about. The reason why we're showing them together is that they're a journey from each other. So you establish what the direct cause is, and then you dig into the root cause, and you do that by creating a cause and effect chain. So this caused this to happen, caused this to happen, and you do that more often than not by asking why, and that through a process called 5 why, where you would go, the machine is stopped. Why did that happen? Unoverloaded, it's tripped. That is the direct cause that has stopped the machine. If you then ask why a number of more times, and using the answer as the next starting point, so the overload tripped. Why? Because there's insufficient oil. Why? Because the oil pump was not delivering correctly. Why? Because it was worn. Why? Because it was contaminated with swarf. You get to the point that why was it contaminated? There was no filter on the intake pump. So that is the root cause, and it's important to say that is the step that you can practicably do something about. You can stop that problem from reoccurring by taking action there. You can still ask why, but it's important to think of this as not a full investigation. You're investigating to the point where you can stop that problem happening, and that this step in this part of the process tends to be where people have the most trouble, because you're trying to dig too deep or you stop too early. So it's really constantly asking yourself that question, well, if I put in place a practical solution here, would it stop that earlier one? And am I sure that nothing's going to interact with the solution that I've put in place, or stop that from being effective? So, and as I say, that knowing where to stop can be difficult. So it's important that you go through and you confirm that you've been effective in it, and your countermeasure has been the correct one. So when we're talking about countermeasures, and it's the final element to give you an overview on, it's because these are the steps you're taking to replace or fix the problem, preventing it from reoccurring. And how effective this tends to be is linked to the slide before, how effective you've been at identifying your root cause, but then also how effective the countermeasure is that you put in place. Why we're telling you this is there's lots of different types of countermeasure, but businesses do tend to jump between the two extremes. So they will intend to eliminate it, so make errors impossible by error proofing. So going back to the welding problem, that would be redesigning the welding machine so that the tips only fit one way. That can be problematic if the equipment is used by more than one job, so it can be impossible to do it. Also, it tends to be quite costly to do. And so businesses, if they do that investigation, find that's too costly, tend to default to the detection or the mitigation. So add in an extra inspection check, or carry out something to help minimize the effect of errors, or flag them up when they happen. It's really important to consider the other two. So how can we make it easier to reduce the risk of that happening, such as color coding, and also perhaps putting in place a replacement for this step. What you're really doing there is trying to find the ultimate balance between the cost and likelihood of the impact problem reoccurring, and the cost and impact of the countermeasure. So it's really, you're doing that balancing act and making sure that they're correct. Okay, and I'm now going to hand you back to Gordon, who's going to do a bit more talking about the templates and the importance of collaboration culture and problem solving.
Thanks, Alastair. So as much as the templates available for practical problem solving differ slightly, they all follow the same general format and structure. SMAS has a version, and we'd be happy to share that with anyone who would like a copy. Now, the complexity of the challenge itself, or the challenger issue itself, will dictate the level of detail required in the various sections. In this example on the screen here from BAE Systems, you're seeing the application of practical problem solving at a pretty sophisticated level. Again, we can probably anonymize this and share it also. It's always useful to have a worked example where you can see the various sections worked through, and we'd be happy to do that. Equally, however, and as Alastair touched on earlier, simpler applications work extremely well also. Here's some hand-drawn versions taken directly from a shop floor team. The important thing really is to begin. If you get used to the format, you'll start to see the range of areas to which it can be applied. And it's also worth noting that many companies use this process as a template for training. It lends itself to training. You can work through the various steps from containment to identification to solution and have a formal sign-off for each stage by a more experienced user. So it lends itself to that. Okay, so before we close out the session, we need to cover one final but extremely important aspect, and that relates to the requirement for a collaborative environment, an environment which provides a framework of support and builds positive behaviours around learning and contribution. So it's certainly true to say that the entire workforce should be engaged in the process of addressing challenges. But that doesn't mean that everybody should be addressing the same challenges. The right individuals at the right levels should be addressing the right challenges. And as complexity increases, so will the requirement, for example, for collaboration between functions, leadership sponsorship, specialist support, and possibly external support. So to finish off, let's have a look at what good collaborative culture might look like. So we've covered the dotted red line area by suggesting that practical problem solving offers a methodology for understanding and addressing critical challenges. I've added to the diagram at the top there by suggesting that a problem solving culture has to be underpinned by shared vision, purpose, communication and trust. So very quickly, let's look at some of the things that allow that kind of culture to develop. So the first one is lead by example. In highly collaborative organizations, leaders use and demonstrate collaboration tools and strategies and encourage employees at all organizational levels to do the same. Equally, however, leaders have to learn how to get out of the way. Leaders and managers in positive environments understand that micromanaging stifles collaboration. So best practices and guidelines are absolutely fine, but let employees do their work their way. In other words, empower employees. Give employees a voice. In order for someone to feel like they have a voice, they have to have a platform and have to be acknowledged. Now, as much as that's a really simple idea, it can get lost quickly in the speed of business. Create a supportive environment. It makes sense to align recognition and incentives with behaviours that you want to encourage. Quite often in SMAS, we see companies that want to develop a quality culture, a collaborative culture, a customer focus, but they only align incentives with productivity. So that's just an area to be wary of. And obviously, if looking at incentives, it should be recognised that personal and social sources of motivation are far more fundamental and effective than short-term monetary rewards. Focus on individual and organisational benefits. So again, highly collaborative organisations communicate to employees about how they will personally benefit from a collaborative environment, how it will improve their work lives and remove barriers, as well as how it will take the organisation to the next level. And finally here in the slide, integrate collaboration into the organisational workflow. So what's intended here, what's been meant here is that collaboration should not be viewed as just another competency that should be incorporated into an employee's skill set. It should be integrated into all aspects of the work because it's fundamental to how the company operates. So in other words, true collaboration is not the same as either teamwork or cooperation, but as an organisation-wide cultural value that should be embedded in the company's fabric. So, final statement to finish off. If, as an organisation, you take some time to learn the techniques around practical problem solving, plus harness a positive and supporting culture, then you absolutely have a process. And that process is going to provide sustainable solutions for critical challenges, as well as creating a cultural framework for further improvement. So thanks for your time and attention this morning. We hope it's been useful, and we'd be really happy to take any questions you have, or in fact, any observations you have on what we've gone through this morning.
Guys, that was just absolutely fantastic. There's been some really nice comments come through on the chat as well. There's one from Robert here who says, what do we think would be a realistic time frame for an average team-based concern and action activity using this A3 template?
So I'd seen it and taken a bit of a note. I think it would be dependent on three factors that I've found is the significance of the problem. So how much is the problem currently costing you? How much will the solution cost you? The complexity of the problem. So how easy is it to get to the root cause of the problem? And a factor I've always found is number of shifts that are currently operating. So if you're all working in one shift, problems tend to get solved a lot quicker. If it needs a bit of collaboration and obviously size of the company, but rather than one time unit, I'd break it down into chunks. So you probably want to be spending at least 3 goes at it, but it can be over the course of like 2 hours, 1 hour, 1 hour, but with a bit of time built in so that you can go away, gather information and come back at different stages. So I would say even for a very significant, very complex problem in a large organization with multiple shifts, you done correctly and with the right support, you should be able to get it done in less than 4 hours, but with that time broken up. So always less than 4, and sometimes considerably less time than that.
And possibly, if I can just add to that, to answer it in a slightly different way, obviously, as Alastair's saying, the nature of the problem is going to dictate maybe the length of period in terms of coming to a resolution. But in terms of understanding the A3 template, what it's doing and how it flows, I think that takes very little time at all. If you've got a good worked example in front of you, for example, like the BAE one we showed there, and you work through that, I think you can understand how the template is flowing and working pretty much immediately, and then it's more turning your head to your own workplace environment.
Thanks ever so much for that really comprehensive reply. There's been a lot of really lovely comments through. I should just say, if anyone can't ask a question on the chat for whatever reason, you are welcome to email me, admin@criticalengineer.net, and I will happily post those questions for you. And just one last question before we make sure that we have our break. We're true to our ethos. Obviously, people are using a lot of collaborative tools, like digital collaborative tools at the moment, because they're working remotely. And Ben here has just asked, has there been any need to kind of digitize that so you can put it on a kind of virtual whiteboard that people can collaborate on? Because it's almost like a nice trigger in itself to encourage people to develop those skills in collaborating from afar, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, Alastair's taken this as well. I suppose the digital environment and the whiteboards that you can use are all valid. I would probably say when first using the A3 template, it's quite good to work through a relatively manual version. It might sound a little bit counterintuitive when there's a lot of discussion around Industry 4, but the best way to get underneath the skin of the tool and understand the tool is to almost go longhand with it initially. And once you understand the process, then yes, absolutely. There's a whole load of collaborative tools out there that can aid sharing and visuals.
I'm just going to, because we're going to keep to time, I just want to say a huge thank you to both of you. And Paul has also jumped in here to say a huge thank you. It's such a helpful roadmap at addressing critical challenges. We'll make sure those slides are available on our website, and this session is going to be available on demand as well afterwards. We have your contact details. So just for me to say a huge thank you, guys, and enjoy the rest of the event. Yeah. And of course, you'll pop back in at the end to answer any questions that arise. So thank you very much. And
we will. And just to say to everybody to enjoy the rest of the day, and as Louise saying, we'll join in the collaborative section at the end of the day.
Thank you so much. So we're going to have a couple of minutes for a break, but after the break, it is an absolute pleasure to introduce Sean McDougall, who has a long history in innovation and supporting businesses. Some great examples on his LinkedIn page if you want to go and have a look at his bio. Very, very interesting. So please do go and have a couple of minutes, stretch your legs to make sure that you're keeping moving, grab a coffee, grab a cup of tea, eat your biscuit if you haven't, or not if you're being good like me, and we'll see you in a short few moments. That doesn't feel like a very long break, does it? It was just a few minutes. We are making sure that we're keeping to schedule as well. You'll have seen in your packs that you received, and apologies to anyone who hasn't received those because they've signed up after Monday. But there was the wonderful postcards in there as well. Do take a look to flick through some of those and some of the images that have been put together by Brian, one of which is the ship analogy that you'll have seen, and we've seen already this morning that when you get people on board, you can make those changes happen. And I know that this is something that Sean's going to elaborate on next as well. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Sean. Hello, Sean, how are you?
I'm really well, thanks, Louise. And that was a fantastic talk just given there by Gordon and Alastair. So looking forward to following on.
Absolutely. So over to you. Do you have a screen to share with us?
Sure.
And you're going to be asking some questions as well. So this is going to be quite participative. So people are able to answer the questions as a live chat within the YouTube chat. As I mentioned as well, if anyone is struggling to leave any comments in the YouTube chat, then they can always email me, admin@criticalengineer.net. So is your screen there ready to share?
Yep.
Perfect. There we go. Okay. I've removed myself, and when you need me back, I will ask the questions in the chat as well.
No problem. Well, thanks very much for giving me the opportunity. West College Scotland has actually been through the process that I'm going to be talking about, and it was a great privilege to be able to mentor them. But if I start just by introducing myself, I'm Sean McDougall, and I'm a business design and innovation consultant. So in effect, I actually see the business itself as something that can be redesigned from what it is to whatever it needs to be in the future. And rather than trying to change the organization using traditional management techniques, what I do is I bring in additional ways of thinking, imagining, working out solutions. so that they can be implemented. And I'm going to present what I think is some pretty powerful evidence of the impact that that can have on your organization, particularly in a very difficult time such as we find ourselves in at the moment. So my background includes working at the Design Council, where I led one of the 3 teams that launched the Double Diamond into the public sphere. The Double Diamond is an innovation framework, a bit like Six Sigma, but focused more on design thinking rather than some of the very practical solutions that were put forward there. And really what design thinking is about is finding new things to do and doing things better than before. And I don't really need to describe the process, because there are literally millions of articles on the web if you want to find out more about it. But it's a kind of an opening up your mind, taking on board new perspectives, combining those perspectives together to get an understanding of what you should really be doing, then opening it up again and thinking, how could we really solve this problem, knock it out of the park? And then once you understood what you need to do, combining those elements again and bringing it to the market and watching it go forever. And my team was focused on future learning. And so we had to develop tools and techniques that could be used by any organization where learning is important. And naturally, we focused on schools. And in addition, I should say, I've set up my own emerging tech company, which is based in Edinburgh. And I took it through 2 rounds of seed funding, and then I received an offer of an 8-figure investment into it, which has, of course, been delayed by the pandemic. But keep your fingers crossed for me. And I'm also an innovation consultant who's worked with Innovate UK for about 10 years now. And in that time, I've worked with about 100 companies that have progressed R&D from a basic idea all the way through to a market launch. And that includes the Eureka Innovative Project of the Year in 2019. And Eureka covers 41 countries, so that was quite an accomplishment. But also medical devices, clean energy, the Internet of Things. And what I would say is that every single one of those companies had an idea that was so good that somebody else decided to spend their own money on it. That's something which we should all have as a target when we're validating ideas in business. And the question really is one idea enough? Where did that idea come from, and where's your next idea going to come from? And as you rise up the ranks in your business, you might find it harder and harder to carve out the time for yourself to have the next idea. So wouldn't it be better if your staff were the people coming to you with ideas for what you could be doing next, or how to do something better than before? So I want to start with 3 hypotheses. Right? The first is that an innovative company is one where anybody can have an idea, and if it's good enough, it will be taken forward. The second is that the critical engineer that we're talking about today might well already be working for you. It's just that there's factors outside of his or her control that are preventing them from reaching the level of contribution that they want to reach and that you would like them to reach as well. And thirdly, companies that have a culture of innovation, they do better than their competitors when you measure them on things like profitability, the shareholder returns, attractiveness to investors, but also customer satisfaction, the quality of the job applicants that you get, your ability to keep people in your company and not lose them elsewhere. All of those things are directly associated with being an innovative company. So, that's what I'm going to try and talk to you today, give you some new things for you to think about and some advice on how you maybe do some things better than before. And let's start with this idea that creativity is both a business enabler and a protector. When I started at the Design Council, which was way back in 2003, I got there just at the point when they published this 10-year study of the impact of creativity on share prices. As a very basic measure, do creative companies do better than their competitors? And when they looked at the period 1993 to 2003, that was a period which had included incredible bear markets and bull markets, all sorts of turbulence and great growth. And in that time, creative companies, just companies that were known for their creativity, like companies like Virgin, for instance, they grew their share price by between 205 and 248%. At the same time, the FTSE 100 achieved growth of 57%. And it's interesting when you think about the times that we're in now. If you look at the bear market that existed from 2000 to 2003, in that time, the FTSE 100 lost 41% of its value. But the emerging technology companies and the creative companies, not only did they decline slower during that market, but by the end of that 3-year period, they'd actually grown overall while the FTSE lost 41% in that time period. I know what you're saying, you know, that's back in the dinosaur era, you know, it could have just been a one-off. But in fact, in 2013 and 2016, the Boston Design Management Institute decided to test that hypothesis. And so they looked at 16 American companies that were all associated with creativity, but some of them were like Walt Disney and Apple, you know, other ones were like Black & Decker and Whirlpool. And what they found at the end of their study was that those creative companies had beaten the Standard & Poor index by 211% over a 10-year period. And this is the amazing thing. This is the takeaway. You know, even companies that are really bad at using design thinking do better than companies that don't use it at all. And this is coming from McKinsey & Co. in a study that they published last year. They took something like 40,000 companies on 5 continents, all different sectors, manufacturing, pharmaceuticals, entertainment, the lot. And what they found was that any company that uses design thinking well, it will typically generate 32% more revenue than the competitors in any given period. And they deliver 56% more in the form of dividends to their shareholders. And even the worst companies grew 4% more revenue and 15% more shareholder value than competitors who don't use design thinking at all. And the one thing they had in common was that they had somebody at board level. It could have been a consultant, it could have been a non-exec, it could have been an actual director of innovation. But generally speaking, that person brought about 10 or 15 years of experience with them and used that experience to benefit the company. And how do they do that? Well, you know, when 2 companies make identical products, the one with the director of innovation makes 20% more profit. Design thinking reduces your need to go back and fix it because you made the mistake earlier on when it was still cheap to do so, or because you realized it was a mistake and never did it in the first place. It also increases the proportion of projects that get to market because the selection process comes with this extra confidence that you're onto a good thing. Innovation directors will help to simplify your systems and processes, and that reduces your manufacturing costs. They build customer loyalty by understanding the needs of the people that, you know, that want your products. They communicate with them better. They position your products better so that they acquire a kind of a higher status, and that can translate into a higher price. And they attract higher quality staff who tend to stay longer as well. But for that to happen, you know, this has to permeate through the whole organization. So it's important that you, as the leaders of organizations, think, I need to have these skills, or I need somebody with these skills, and I need to be open and allow them to work in the ways that will deliver benefits like this. So we're going to come to our first exercise. And this is about benchmarking where you are now and where you want to be in the future. Remember, a critical engineer is only going to succeed if the whole organization is learning, or is at least open to learning. And for that reason, I find myself going back and thinking about the work I've done with schools, because, you know, schools have a full-time job of delivering learning and being learning environments. So that doesn't necessarily mean that they're good at it. It doesn't mean they can't do it better. And in fact, when we think about the school system, there's a lot of perpetuation as opposed to innovation. So in fact, when I was working at the Design Council, we were able to, you know, really take some people forward quite significant distances. I'm going to give you an example now. This is Ian Holland, who was a head teacher at a school in Lancashire, and he went on to win UK Head Teacher of the Year. I remember when I met him, and he was really concerned about improving concentration levels in his school. And he went in and he said to a class of kids, well, what do you think I should do? Do you think I should make more interesting lessons, or do you think we should try for project-based learning, or is there something that you would like us to do instead? And the kids all said, clean the toilets. And he said, well, what? Why do you want me to clean the toilets? And they explained to him that the toilets were really in such a terrible state that they didn't want to use them. And to avoid using them, they didn't drink any water in the daytime. So by the time they got to the early afternoon, the concentration levels were really flagging because they were so dehydrated. And Ian thought to himself, I would never in a million years have thought that there might be a relationship between the state of the toilets and my children's ability to concentrate. Here I am, an expert teacher, but I had not understood the working environment in which we are, and I hadn't understood the needs of the people that I'm here to support and nurture. So he cleaned those toilets. The kids started using them, drinking water again. Concentration levels went through the roof. And that was the start for him of creating a more collaborative and open culture where he would receive ideas from other people, and it's his job to implement them because it made it better for everybody. In the course of doing that, the pass rate in his school rose from 37 to 62%. And due to that changed culture, he won UK Head Teacher of the Year. And he also told me that kids going out on work experience, he got a phone call once from somebody saying, these kids you keep sending me. And he went, yes, thinking he was about to get a complaint. And the guy says, they keep asking all these questions. And he started to say, I'm sorry. And then the man said, this is fantastic. These are the only kids in this area who ever ask us questions when they're here. And that was the nub of it. That is a critical engineer of the future right there. And his school has become a factory making them. So in his school, not only has he got higher exam pass rates, students who are happier, he has communication between the departments going much better than before, which is delivering budget savings. There's better branding, which has raised his profile in the community. The students who are more included, so they engage more with the learning. And he gets a higher caliber of teacher applying to work there. Now, Ian got there, but when he started, he wasn't entirely sure of how he was to respond to the challenge of being given a whole new school to build. You know, a history teacher who becomes a head teacher is not necessarily the best equipped to deliver a £25 million construction project that will impact on the local village or town for 50 or 60 years. So we found it useful to think about how his school operated the way it did and how things were going to change going forward. We created this list here, which I call polarities. So they're really polar opposites. So for instance, you know, we could say that, you know, one option for the school going forward is that absolutely everybody should work all the time from one building. But another option is that there shouldn't be a building, that the school of the future should be entirely virtual. One option could be that the teachers would decide everything that happens in the school. And another would be that this would be an entirely self-led environment where students decided for themselves what they wanted to learn. It could be a place where, you know, you work on your own, or it could be a place where you work in teams. You could advance according to your age, or you could advance according to your ability. And we looked at all these options. And then Ian and his teaching staff and the students were all asked to put dots onto the graph to indicate where they think they are right now and where they would like to be going forward. And all those dots created a mosaic a little bit like this, but we were able to average them out. And in doing that, we got an overall perspective of where that organization happened to be right now and where they wanted to be going forward. And you can imagine just having a piece of paper like this and going through that process. Can you imagine how much conversation happened about the pros and cons of things, and the amount of education and insight, and how receptive people came as they realized that for instance, that the children wanted to go much further than they ever thought that they might want to go, because the kids were just more capable. Or maybe that some challenges were quite big, but they were really important and they needed to get on top of them. And so they set some targets. You know, to get from academic learning to work-based learning would be quite a challenge for that school. It would take them quite a while. But having understood that that was important, they were able to have conversations about it and make plans about how they were going to get there. Nobody gets there in a straight line, but the process of moving is itself important, and they did, in fact, get there in the end. And so I'd love to invite you now to have a go at this yourself. I've put some categories in place here which might apply to your place of work. And of course, we've had conversation this morning, you know, where other issues and topics have been raised. What I would invite you to do is in the comments box in YouTube, look at each question, think about where your organization is right now and where you would like it to be in the future. And so if the answer for question 1 is that you would give yourself a score of 3 out of 10, and you wish in the future that you had a score of 6 out of 10, please just type into the box Q1 3 6. Or if you feel that for Q1 it's you get 5 out of 10 and you're quite happy there and you want to stay there, then put Q1 5 5. And what we will do is we will collect together all that information that you provide in the comments box, and we're going to use it to get an averaged out position of where Scottish SMEs think they are at the minute, where they'd like to be in the future. And please use 7, 8, 9, and 10 if you wish to highlight any additional issues that you think haven't been covered or are really important and should be thought about. So let's just take 1 or 2 minutes to do that right now. Thank you, Ben. Straight in with one. Thank you very much, William. It's interesting to see the contrasts in the answers that have come in so far. And I would add as well that, you know, these slides are going to be available afterwards. And in fact, there are questionnaires as well. And if you want to have access to them and do this in your own time, then you're more than welcome to do so. So in the interest of time, I'm going to move it on because once you've done that kind of benchmarking, we have then a challenge of selecting one of the themes, you know, and deciding for ourselves how we're going to move forward. You might decide that the theme, which is the one we're talking about today, is how are we going to make our organization more innovative? How do we create this culture of innovation? And that is indeed going to have a time frame and different work packages which will have to be implemented over that time in order to get you there. And of course, you want to be able to measure it, as you have just done, where we are and where did we get to in the end. So here are some questions which apply to systems of innovation. Generally speaking, in an organization, if you were that head teacher and you were given the responsibility of creating a £25 million school, you might ask yourself, I just don't feel equipped to do this. All right. And to be fair, if you don't have certain things in place, you're probably not going to succeed. Equally, if you want to be an innovative organization, there are things you need to have in place in order to be able to execute a decision of some kind. So these highlight 10 issues. Again, why don't you just work your way through, give yourselves a score out of 5 for as many questions as you can get through in, let's say, 1 minute. So the answer to Q1, you just type in Q1 space 3 or 5 or 1, whatever you think. Okay, now hopefully you're feeling to yourself that you've got some of these things in place, but I'm hoping you're asking yourself, have you got them enough, or have you got them too much, or oh dear, we need to make a start on that one. Progressing on from there, we find ourselves thinking about cultures of innovation, because those are the systemic things. Those are the tools and equipment that you need to make it work. But you actually need people, and those people need to be able to relate to each other in certain ways. And so I've put some questions up here. I know for a fact that many people are frightened to put forward a good idea because they feel that it will be shot down as soon as it's mentioned. That's a cultural issue that can be corrected. I also know that people do have ideas, but sometimes they don't try them out because the consequences of failure could be quite severe for them. And so obviously there's a need for failure to be seen as a learning opportunity. But equally, there's a need for that failure to happen quite early on when it's a small thing and not to happen on a grand scale. So these are the kind of characteristics that you would find in an organization that is highly creative. One where people do stay. They don't mind putting forward their ideas. They see them being put into practice. And all of that translates into a business which is extremely attractive to investors. People who see that you've got new ideas coming along and that you will continue to have new ideas coming along in the future. And this was really for Paul from West College, Scotland. We talked about this as, where do you start? What's the best way to actually begin to make a change in that culture in your organization so that people do feel able to put ideas forward? And the best place to start is actually inside your own organization's physical office, because you can try things out there, and if it goes wrong, there's no external collateral. If you show people that you're willing to implement ideas and suggestions as to how the place could be run better, then not only do you deliver an actual better working environment, but you create that sense of people being heard and that their ideas are valued. And of course, then they will start to apply that thinking to the things that you make and the things you sell and the things that you could make or sell in future. We invented this exercise way back at the Design Council as a simple introduction to that idea, because as managers, people get locked up in being in charge of something and keeping it going, have a view of themselves as expert, but in fact spend a lot of their time separated from what's really going on. So what we did was we imagined a trip to IKEA. I mean, everybody's been to IKEA. And we're going to try and reverse engineer the place. Right? What we're going to do is, and I'll move up the slide on to show you, we're going to ask some questions now about IKEA in terms of the physical environment that you see, the systems and processes that enable that place to work and that you experience as a customer. I'll give you an example. There's a one-way system in IKEA. For instance, there's a complaint system. And then, of course, all of us, somewhere or other, have got an IKEA product sitting in the house. What do you think about those products? And of course, how does IKEA communicate itself from that view of itself from the motorway through to its catalogs, and other ways of communicating that you might encounter on a trip? So let's take a few minutes now, and I'm going to ask you for your suggestions one at a time. These are just your first impressions. Tell me about the physical environment that you see when you're on a trip to IKEA. And please just type them into the comments box as before. I'm thinking it's a cold environment sometimes. I find it's a place where it's very easy to get lost. There's sterile. That's a very good word to describe it, yes. Now, we could build up loads and loads of words that would describe that physical environment. Think about the systems and processes. You know, so I talked earlier about the one-way system. Do you have any others? I mean, I remember at the end when you've decided to buy something that's slightly too long for your car, and you have to get it through the checkout area, and they, you know, with the laser scanners that they use for the barcodes and everything upside down. So yes, great words. Yes, overwhelming, and yet a good layout to make you see everything that they sell. Pros and cons. What do you think about the products and services? And just to define services, by the way, there's a canteen, for instance, in every IKEA. So it's okay to say that you like the meatballs. That's a product too. Who do you think those products are aimed at? Yeah, basic, functional. That's right. Very standardized. Yes. This could be seen as a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, students love it. I'm not sure, you know, how many multimillionaires are stocking their houses with IKEA. And then finally, the communication methods. You know, and this is not just printed, you know, it's everything. Is IKEA easy to see when you're driving there? Great hot dogs. Yes, very true. Yes. So I find that IKEA's catalogs are okay. I find their instruction manuals are absolutely terrible. Occasionally they advertise on TV. Sometimes you'll hear tannoy system when you're in there. All sorts of things like that. Now, the reason I've introduced this to you as an exercise is because sometimes it's very difficult to apply an exercise like this to an office in the office because our eyes get narrow and focused. But when we talk about a place like IKEA, where we've all been as a customer, we get to see it as it really is. Running an exercise like this for a small team in your workplace will actually have the effect of introducing some humor into the atmosphere, but allowing people to create a really good picture of the place. And then what you do is you repeat the exercise, applying it to your place. All the knowledge that you have generated by imagining IKEA will then come tumbling out again, because your physical environment might also have some of those characteristics or be very different. Yours might be really hot, whereas the other one's really cold. Some of your systems and processes, people mightn't have thought about them, but having had a walk around IKEA in their head, they become more aware of them. Your products and services, suddenly people feel able to talk about them objectively in the same way that they talked about IKEA's products and services. And how you communicate, of course, that's a chance now for people to talk honestly about that, and to see if there's any improvements that could be made. I'm not going to ask you to do this exercise just now. I'm just going to show you a picture. If you do the IKEA exercise and then you repeat it, applying it to your place, in this case, the directorate of a local authority, you'll find that each small table will produce an absolute, snowball of ideas. This is one table, and each table in that room had produced a similar amount of ideas. You can then start to cluster them together, and you'll see for yourself which are the really important ideas in terms of popularity. And of course, you'll spot some suggestions that maybe only one person made, but you'll think that's really insightful and we should do something about that. And from there, you can make a graph, set some targets for yourself. So this is what happened at Ian's school when he did exactly what we've just done there, and realized they had problems with acoustics. Temperature was an issue, the toilets, which I talked about earlier. In terms of the communication, they wanted to improve their branding. They wanted to celebrate success. They needed more parental engagement. Lots of really practical and easy suggestions that could make a big difference in that school, and in fact in any school. And you'll find exactly the same thing will happen in your office, with people showing that willingness to put forward ideas, and you say, great idea, let's make it happen. You're starting on that journey then towards creating that culture of innovation. And so think about your place as it needs to be. Okay. Once you've understood the building as it is, and you've been able to make some changes to it, now think to yourself, I have a critical engineer working for me. I need to make this a very attractive workplace for them so that other people come and work here too. What are the needs of that critical engineer? In exactly the same way as you might say, what are my needs as somebody going to IKEA? Or what do I look for in an ideal workforce? What does the critical engineer look for in terms of the physical environment in which they work? What does a critical engineer look for in terms of systems and processes that enable them to work? How do they communicate? What kind of products and services are they hoping to create and deliver? And what kind of impact do they want to have on your existing product range? This is the stuff that follows on, and it becomes an exciting working environment, and an easy, and it's cheap to make all of these changes as well. And so, bringing it back to that issue of schools, and I've chosen schools, as I say, they're learning environments, but it's easier to talk about something which is outside of our sector than to focus on typical factories, shall we say. But I hope you got the point. But listen to this. I'm going to read a couple of things out now and ask you whether or not you feel that it would be great if your employees were like this. Would you like employees who were soaring educationally? Would you like them to be confident, articulate? Would you like them to talk as managers and decision makers rather than sitting there silently waiting to be told what to do? What if they were seeing possibilities? What if they started questioning and asking what if? More, the head teacher felt that her children in this project became more confident, better to put forward their own views, developing their own skills, and working with each other. And I should explain, by the way, that what these children did was entirely without the involvement of any teachers. They designed and built a fountain that can see and hear and respond to things going on around it. And it's the largest exercise in co-design that's ever been done in the United Kingdom. And it was the first project that I did when I set up as an innovation consultant. It would be fantastic if all workplaces had this sense about them. And all of these children are going to go on and have an impact in their workplace because of what they've learned by being in an environment like this. So I hope you found that those very simple examples illustrate how to move from where you are right now to moving to having a culture of innovation, one in which that critical engineer would be writing to you saying, you know, if any jobs come up, can I come and work for you? And to think about the effect it has as a leader, that the company basically is going to start running itself. People are going to come to you with solutions. They're going to bring ideas for new products. You're going to find it easy to get investment for those products because your development process is really good and very customer focused and practical. You're not going to be launching things and just hoping that it works, because you'll have that sense and you'll have customer loyalty. And if you would like any help in doing any of that, then, you know, I'm here and other people are here. But on this slide, I've just put out a few of the things that I can help you with, and my contact details at the bottom. And thank you very much indeed for your very active participation. That was quite a giggle, seeing people engage like that. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the day. Thanks very much.
Oh, thank you, Sean. That's just been absolutely fantastic. I know that everyone has a lasting memory of their time in IKEA, and they were able to draw on those memories, and lots of lively chat and discussion. So thank you for that. One question, I did ask everybody if they wanted to leave any questions in the chat, and David's asked a question. Is it easy getting organisational buy-in to these approaches in your experience?
Yeah, well, like I say, the thing is, think big, start small. And a lot of people are frightened of change, and yet they spend a large amount of time at work complaining about things. So, you know, if you give them something like that IKEA exercise and you do it properly, then you're giving them the opportunity to advise you on things that could be changed basically for free, and that make them feel better about working there. And that is what delivers buy-in. And the other thing I would say just very quickly is there's the culture that we're talking about here is one that you might describe as like a greenhouse. So instead of bringing your fragile idea to the boardroom and terrified that people are going to stand on it or shoot holes in you as soon as you speak, you know, the role of the boardroom is going to change. When you bring that idea, everybody's going to say, we have collective expertise here to nurture this idea and turn it into something that could really thrive and really look wonderful. So that's the difference. You know, you either shoot each other's ideas down or you plant seeds and you grow them up and nurture them together.
That's just such a lovely illustration. And I guess what it epitomizes is that developing a culture isn't an off-the-shelf kind of package. It's something that has to be cultivated, and you just explained there how you can start to plant those seeds and let it flourish as well. So some really, really nice feedback on the chat for you. I've just put some of the comments up there, and of course we have our feedback form, and you're not going to be disappearing because you'll be able to pop in at the end when we have our little get together and thank everybody. So big thank you on behalf of West College Scotland, all the sponsors, as our first exploratory session with lots and lots of hands-on and interaction there. That just worked brilliantly. So thank you very much.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you, Louise.
Okay, take care. So next up, I'm delighted to say that we have Ben Rouse, who is an old friend and colleague of mine. We've worked together over the years on a number of projects and webinars and face-to-face events, and he's going to be building on the last two speakers and this morning's panel with how you can really start to unlock your toolkit. So there's been a really nice flow to the day, and we'll build on that fantastic session that we've just seen there. So we're going to have a quick few minutes break, and I will then bring Ben into the studio. So thank you very much, and make sure you stretch those legs and grab a cuppa. Okay. Welcome back. Hardly time to boil the kettle, but I hope that you've managed to get a cup of tea and are ready for our third session. As I mentioned, is Ben Rouse, who's going to be joining us. So welcome, Ben, who's actually in the south of England today.
Oh, I wasn't going to mention that. Welcome. Thank you for having me. Really, really honoured for all the work gone in by yourself and West College Scotland and all the speakers. It's been really interesting to kind of, I've had the advantage of going last and to sort of really hear what everyone else has had to contribute and make sure I can sort of add to that.
Yeah, no, it's been a fantastic event so far. I know that we could sit here and talk about it all day, but it's important that people have, you know, an event that they feel they can come along to. It's not eked out over a whole day, and you know, we're still having that ethos of having that feeling of participating in something. Even with the biscuit was getting a bit of love there. It's a good job we didn't send everyone curly sandwiches to be truly authentic in the event experience. So you're going to be focusing now on unlocking your toolkit of innovation. And this is going to be interactive as well. So we're going to be asking questions. We're going to be getting people to join in. And yeah, if there's anything else I can do to help, just give me a shout. So over to you, Ben.
Thank you so much, Louise. Yeah, it's really nice to be here. I'm going to be talking about unlocking your toolkit. And actually, a bit of serendipity. Louise selected this particular photo for the slides. And actually, it comes from this larger photo. So today I'm going to be talking about design sprints as a way that you can start to look at a toolkit for innovation. And it's really nice to sort of build on Sean's session about design thinking. Design thinking is, as well as involving a set of tools similar to the ones you saw Sean hint at, it's this cultural way of working. But what we've seen in recent years is the emergence of a design sprint, which takes the principles of design thinking, but puts them into a very focused few days of work on addressing some sticky challenges you might find in your organization. And obviously, the last sort of year has given us one of the most almighty sticky challenges to take on, as COVID has kind of changed the way that we live, work, and do pretty much everything. And I will talk a bit at the end as well about how it's changed delivering a design sprint quite significantly as well. So without further ado, I'm going to give you an example to start off with of a little project. Now, there's an organization called Special Projects who do some really interesting innovation work. And they were approached by Samsung, and Samsung wanted them to build a phone for the elderly. So they went out and had a look at what was already out there on the market in terms of phones for the elderly person, and they generally found examples like this one that you see here of a very slimmed down, simplistic phone. So obviously they could have set out on the journey to build a better version of what they'd seen on the market, but because they are design thinking focused, they decided that they would do an exercise with a group of more elderly people and actually find out what they really wanted. And to do that, they gathered together a focus group of older people and gave them a banana. And they asked them to take their banana and turn it into their ideal phone. So they asked the people to draw on it, stick things into it to identify the features that they'd like to see in a phone. Feel free, if you've got a banana to hand, to start adapting it into your ideal phone. If you don't, I'd love to hear in the comment or see in the comments the types of features you might like to see your phone develop. Now, the interesting thing was that, do you know, I don't know if you can maybe get there on the chat and the comments before me, but you'll never guess the features that elderly people wanted their phones to have. They wanted their phone to kind of tell them where they were and how to get to the place they wanted to get to. And they'd really like it if their phone could allow them to connect with their family, maybe see pictures of their grandchildren or connect with friends who'd moved across the world. And pretty much what they described with their phones, with pipe cleaners and Sharpie marker written all over it, was they wanted a phone that acted a little bit like all of the existing smartphones that were on the market. So what Special Projects managed to do with their design approach is realize, and in a similar vein to the way Alastair and Gordon were talking about identifying problems and drilling down into the root causes, is that Samsung identified that there might be a market for specific phones for an older generation, but it wasn't the case. They didn't need a different phone. They just really needed to understand how to use the one they got. So the solution that was developed was actually a better experience for unboxing a phone. While some people, and they actually did an interesting look at giving a brand new phone to a few younger people and a few older people and watching them through the process. The younger people tended to rip the box open, discard the instructions and start playing around with it, whereas the older generation were quite inclined to read the instructions. So they put together a book, something you're very familiar with, a familiar sort of tactile object, where if you placed your phone in, it would take you through simply and straightforwardly the steps that you needed to do to understand all the features on your phone. So the reason I wanted to talk about that first was by doing some focused user-centric work, the designers were able to avoid a rather expensive and timely and time-consuming failure, and actually come up with a rather elegant and simple solution to make sure that existing smartphones are accessible to everyone who wanted to access those types of features. So being user-focused is one of the most important things about the design process. And I'm sure many of you do a lot of work on this. Obviously, it's become more focused over the last year because the needs of the users have probably changed, their situations have changed, and the products that they were engaging with, the way they were buying those products has changed significantly as well. Actually, I should update this slide. That's not what a user-focused experience looks like these days. It looks a little bit more like this. So being user-focused was really important. And as Gordon and Alastair talked about earlier, in terms of particular manufacturing processes, is finding the right problem to solve. So similar to them, we're going to talk about good problem finding techniques in that toolkit. But this one is more focused, similar to Sean, on the wider organizational change. Rather than finding the issues in your processes, it's about actually you've discovered that the process isn't necessary anymore because no one's buying that thing, and you need to redefine your market and everything along the way, and find some new problems to solve, many of which have been created over the last sort of 9 to 12 months, haven't they? And the design sprint is a process that a lot of people are using to do that. So the design sprint takes the wider principles that Sean was talking about with design thinking and condenses them into a 5-day process. If you go by one of the originators of the design sprint, if you look around, you'll also discover design sprints that can be done in 4 days. And I don't know whether this is kind of the race to the 1-day design sprint, like, you know, if you bring out 7-day abs, I'll bring out 6-day abs. But the principles I'll talk you through hopefully will give you some practical activities and approaches that you can take to tackling some of those sticky challenges that you've been faced with this year. So if you want to know more about the design sprint, a good place to start is the design sprint book by Jake Knapp. So it's called Sprint. And actually, Jake and a few other people, when he was working at Google, created this when they knew they wanted to attack a problem, but kept on getting sort of waylaid with other tasks. So they set aside a week to really go at this particular challenge that they were thinking about. And so the book will talk you through that 5-day process for taking on sort of big problems and testing the ideas and getting real feedback within 5 days. The idea being that you can go from an idea to learning about it without the costly steps of building and launching. and you can understand whether it's worth investing in tooling up the machinery and all those steps that you might take once you're onto something, but knowing whether that is a worthwhile step. And being able to adapt quickly is obviously really important at the moment, and funds are not readily available to sort of have rather expensive failures. So that's the theory. There are various different models. If you search for design sprint, you'll see versions of this process where you understand and define your problem, you sketch ideas as a group. And again, as Sean said, that critical engineer is probably in your ranks. The innovation potential is already in your organization. And here's a practical process that you can use to unlock that potential for everyone generating ideas in a safe and collaborative space, and then deciding on the ideas you want to take forward, and very quickly prototyping and testing them. And if the solution turns out to be something that is not viable, then you know very quickly that you can not waste time on that. And that is part of the reason that the statistics you saw from Sean earlier around companies that are implementing these kinds of strategies are being successful, is they're not wasting time on things that would cost them a lot of money and time, and they're finding the gems because they're sort of tapping into the inherent potential in their people. So some of the things that you can be doing to add to this toolkit, very similar to Sean's activity with IKEA, is really understanding whether it's your own organization or whether it's the customers that you're trying to serve. And one of the techniques that I often use with the organizations that I work with and when we facilitate design sprints is we ask them prior to the design sprint to do an empathy piece. Can you really get under the skin of the customer experience, just like Sean was describing with IKEA? And one of the ways to do that might be an empathy map. So there's one there which we used in an engagement with school leaders, sort of trying to support teachers. What does she think and feel? What does she see? And what does she hear? And being able to go around and really get under the skin of the problem and identify some of the key areas. So starting with understanding is really, really important. One of the steps in the design sprint, if you have a look at some of the links that we'll put in the comments, is that you've got a few activities at the start of your 5 days, lightning talks where you will get, pardon me, one of the things that you'll get is lightning demos where you will get everyone to talk about the situation and share their collective understanding. So I'm going to ask you to do the same. One of the things we'll do at the beginning of a design sprint is we will ask everybody involved, and it's normally a multidisciplinary group of people from an organization. What we'll ask them is, come up with some how might we statements, a challenge statement. How might we identify new markets that allow us to change what we offer? How might we support, I think one from earlier when I think it was Lynne was talking about that water cooler moment. How might we recreate the water cooler moment for our staff working remotely? Might be one of those that came up from earlier. So I'd really love it if you could create a how might we statement that has occurred to you during the course of this live stream or before, and some of the sticky challenges that you're facing as an organization. So I'll give you some time to put those in and we can have a reflection back on your how might we statements. So how might we do what for who in order to change something? And I'm sure that COVID has provided you with lots of reflection on the challenges that you face, whether you've got to refocus the business, whether you've got to re-engage with customers who've got different demands now. Any of those challenges, really love to see those go into the comments as a how might we statement. Now, one of the key parts to the design sprint is removing, as Sean alluded to, removing that kind of ownership of ideas, and moving the discussion forward. One of the reasons I really started using this was because I was very frustrated with long drawn out meetings that didn't really seem to achieve much. So the beginning of the process, and a technique you can use straight away, is a kind of post-it note vote activity. Everybody contributes as many how might we's as they can possibly do, and then everybody gets a few votes to vote for the how might we that you think is the most pressing challenge to you and the organization, which means within a few minutes you've made a decision about what you need to focus on. Doesn't mean you discount all the others that didn't get a vote. It just means that as an organization, you might need to focus in on those particular how might we's first. Of course, thank you for your contributions. How might we support staff dealing with homeschooling? I think that's such an important one, Caroline. Currently, my wife is on the floor above me dealing with that very situation. So it's very poignant. And I think it comes again, I think, to something that Gordon and Alastair talked about in a very different context. Schools are sending out work for students. Meetings are coming in for employees, and no one's really sort of factoring in that those are going to be competing demands. And actually, you've got a lot of people getting to the end of the day feeling like they haven't done very well at work and they haven't done very well with their kids' homeschooling. And that double kind of failure feeling is something that we really need to help people not have. I can also see how might we justify the costs. I think as we've seen with COVID, change can happen quite quickly when you add some restraints in there. And I think a great one is sort of how might you might deal with, what if we had no money at all, and sort of work within that context. Okay, so keep those how might we's coming in, and just a reference to one of those skills. If you're starting from scratch with the design thinking and design sprint process, one place that often work people is that retooling meetings to have a post-it note vote approach so that decisions can get made swiftly and you can kind of move on to taking action. So something that we come to next is sketching, drawing out and sketching your idea. So that you can see there is an example of a solution sketch, a 3-step version of someone's idea. And what we do is when we're in a design sprint, everybody comes up with a solution sketch based on the problem we've decided on. And you put those up on the wall, and it gives everyone a chance to go around and see a simple version of everyone's idea, which we can then again vote on. It touches on my question to Gordon and Alastair earlier about have they had to digitize their A3 template, was really based around my own challenges with the design sprint process, and the facilitation that I do has generally been lots of post-it notes, Sharpies, all in one room, sticking stuff on the walls and very close together. And obviously we've had to adapt. So I've run remote design sprints. I'm using tools like Miro or Mural, which provide you with that kind of post-it note wall environment. And initially I thought it was going to be hugely difficult to replicate the in-person experience, but it has actually provided some bonuses as well. Not least that I have all of the artifacts from everybody's work all in one place, rather than desperately trying to sort of gather evidence from around an office wall quickly and wondering where that really exciting post-it note has gone that I've managed to mislay. So the digitization of the process has had a couple of really interesting benefits to how we work. We've obviously had to spread the process out a little bit. But what we'll ask everyone to do is then again vote on the solution sketches. Which parts of the solutions really get you excited about solving the how might we that we chose earlier? So you'll see there that we get everyone to get up and start placing their voting dots, this time on parts of the idea. What are the bits that are really appealing to us? Now, in the manufacturing and Industry 4.0 point of view, I think there are so many potential ways for SMEs to adapt to that new world, to those new technologies, but maybe the wrong choice along the way, and spending time tooling up in a certain area that could be a waste of time. I think this is where I think the process fits in, of making sure that you're really confident in the direction that you're going to go, but you're also able to make those confident decisions quickly, and not waste time and sort of miss the boat. So that's where I think I felt when sort of working with Louise and Paul and the wider team on the critical engineering project, is where I think it kind of fits in with the small and medium enterprises that we're talking about. Next is prototyping, and I think this is a great example of prototyping. So genuinely, McDonald's were considering whether people would order McSpaghetti. Feel free to add in the comments if that is a meal you've always been waiting to be on the menu when you head into McDonald's. But rather than go through recipes and produce McSpaghetti and start to go through lots of large industrial processes to produce it, all they did was, in a few restaurants, they changed the sign that you see behind the server's head. And they had McSpaghetti as one of the options you could choose. And if someone came into the store and looked up and said, "Oh, I have a McSpaghetti, please," the servers would just simply say, "Oh, terribly sorry, we've run out. Would you like anything else?" And they'd just do a little tally mark in front of them to identify how many orders they got for McSpaghetti in the day. As you can probably tell, if you visited McDonald's recently, it was not generally a popular choice, and they didn't decide to go any further with it. And all they spent on finding that out was the cost of producing a sign that went up in the display behind behind the counter. So they didn't spend much, and they actually they understood that there was no point in tooling up and sort of forming recipes for a new meal that was not going to have any traction with the customers. So it might be that this prototyping is just maybe the design sprint helps you identify where you shouldn't go and where you shouldn't waste your time, as well as often producing some really useful and innovative projects. Sorry, just spotting Paul sort of eagerly going, "Where do I get it?" So that prototyping process is something that we do in the design sprint. Here's an example where we had some, again, educators in this case, redesigning the learning experience. And this particular team, this was a global event, but this was the standout prototype. And I can happily inform you that everyone around this particular table was Scottish. And they were talking about how you could make learning more interactive and focused on outdoor real activities. And this was the prototype that they put together. And what we did is we brought in real students to test out their prototype, to interact with it, to look at it, to react to it. And because, let's be honest, that prototype is a little bit scrappy. It's made out of Lego, a few tablets and some pipe cleaners and string. So the students felt very, very confident in ripping it apart and really poking away at their idea. And what it gave is it gave those educators some real feedback. So the other thing is, you may have been through this experience where you put a really polished, beautiful looking prototype in front of people, and they might say, "Oh, wow, that's amazing." But inside their head going, I don't want to tell them that doesn't look great, because they've clearly put so much time into it. Whereas if you can put something scrappy in front of someone, you are much more likely for them to give you an honest bit of feedback about, why is that there? I don't understand what this bit does. And wouldn't I want to do it like this rather than this? And you haven't spent huge amounts of time. You're not too heavily invested in the outcome to say, "Oh, great. Well, we realize we need to change our course of action now." And that is a very quick version of the design sprint process that we facilitate with lots of organizations, to spend a few days looking at their really sticky challenges, coming up with loads of new ideas and quickly deciding whether they should be taken forward to the next stages or not. So those stages of design that you're all very familiar with, that's what comes next. And we might do a follow-on design sprint after a bit of time, and sort of after we've had a bit of time to sort of take out some ideas to user testing again, we might reiterate it just to sort of really make sure we're on the right track. And then all of that hard work, time and costs can be invested with much more confidence that you're going in the right direction. So to tie it back to what we're really talking about is you are all in a position where the technologies are developing in a way that do provide new opportunities. COVID has obviously come along and in one way thrown a spanner in the works, but also given you new perspectives. As the panel at the start were talking about, looking at things through a different lens is really effective for innovation. You've just got to have the toolkit to adapt to that. So with that in mind, obviously you'll see here, Bernard Marr a couple of years ago in Forbes was talking about Industry 4.0, but also about the challenge that has with recruiting or reskilling employees for the right skills to go forward. You've seen lots of examples of ways that you can start to do that. And I hope the conversation continues on beyond today about how you can be identifying and developing those critical engineers within your organizations and finding new ones as well. And maybe the design sprint process, and as I say, I'll put a few links in the comments so you can start exploring a bit more, might be one of those bits of the toolkit that you want to have a look at that will allow you to adapt to an ever-changing world. And give you a safe space for sharing those ideas. So obviously the skills that we've talked about, and Louise will talk a bit more about meta skills, and you've got her on-demand session that you'll be able to have a look at as well if you want to dive in a bit deeper into the wider skills. But it just leaves me to say thank you and keep the comments coming. And yeah, I'll pass back over to Louise and as we sum up.
Thanks, Ben. That's just such a great session. There's been some lovely comments coming through, not only about McSpaghetti, but lots of people really finding that process is going to really help with not only product design, but how to work within the team as well. There was one question, and I was going to save this for the leadership panel, but I think it might be good to answer this now. And it's from William Scott. How might we empower colleagues to be proactive in identifying their own upskilling needs?
I think that's a really nice how might we that I'd be really excited to see come up in a design sprint session or a longer design thinking engagement, because actually, just like Sean was talking about, that is a perfect one to put back on the organization and say, well, actually, what if everyone comes up with ideas for how they see upskilling themselves fitting into their homeschooling and their work and their wider experience? So I'd love to take that through the mill of a design sprint and see what Billy's organisation and other organisations could come up with, because I think there's probably lots of ideas within the employees that we're talking about here and colleagues that could really innovate in that space, because there's lots of content out there, but how do you find the time to engage with it? Where does learning fit in? And we've talked about it with schools, Louise, in the past. But yeah, I think, I don't know whether I've dodged that question, but I'd essentially just take it into a design sprint.
I think sometimes, and I've worked with an organisation that wanted to do this, William, and instead of being quite explicit and asking the question, you know, we want you to identify your own skills and where you want to develop, they just invited people to, first of all, be part of those processes, like Sean was demonstrating, where everyone was contributing to potential improvements in the company, but they actually went one step further and said, you know, we're going to give you all X amount of time each week, even if it was 1 hour, 2 hours, built within their 37, 40-hour week to develop a passion project. And that could be any idea that they've got that might contribute towards the organisation improving. And one member of staff, as their passion project, decided to use a 360 image and to use that 360 image to actually create an onboarding tool of what the inside of one of the workshops looked like. And they used a tool that put tags on what each machinery part did. And this was such an engaging way to help on board new members of staff, and it came out of someone's passion for photography and 360 and tinkering, so that actually then became a company asset. And what that member of staff did in having their own mini passion project was demonstrate some critical thinking. They demonstrated some leadership. They also demonstrated how they had really contributed as a team player and collaborated with the organisation. So sometimes we need to kind of go around houses and maybe be not so explicit about what we're doing there. But we have a few minutes before the break and as we move into the leadership panel, and I do actually have quite a treat for you. I mentioned right at the outset that we were joined by Brian Mathis, who is one of the most articulate visually people that I've met, and he has helped us with some of the branding, and he's been following along and putting together his own sketches of what we've been talking about today. And I've got some to share with you. He's been tinkering in the background and using that sketching type strategy that Ben was demonstrating. So the first thing that he has suggested is, make sure we keep things going. There's such a real kind of time that we've been through. Early on, someone said that, it was doom and gloom, but we have actually been able to, I'm just going to move Ben there. We have actually been able to, thrive. And the important message of today is to actually make sure that we keep things going. This is obviously relative to COVID and how we build on that resilience. And actually, we've demonstrated that we have this capacity to act and an ability to change as well. So we've been able, to really demonstrate our own resilience, which is a really important skill, adaptability, which is an important skill. So if you have the opportunity to say this to your members of staff, that they are actually showing some of these skills without knowing it, then again, William, that might be a nice way to answer your question. I just love this. We talked earlier on, Dr. Lynne O'Hare mentioned, how we can keep people together, how we can try and, manage to have some interaction under the current conditions and meeting the requirements and having walking meetings. I know that's in level 3, not level 4, as we're currently in now, but making sure that we are producing a toolkit of our own as a result of today, and we can add some of these ideas in. A problem well stated is a problem half solved. So, make sure that we are voicing what those problems are, and maybe using some of the tools that Sean suggested as well, is to actually get those problems onto paper, and also through Gordon and Alastair's tools, identifying what those problems are. And you've got some great resources from SMAS there as well. The water cooler check-in, I thought that was a pretty nifty idea as well. And we're trying to do this in a virtual way. So I'm not sure it's a good idea to put a water cooler on your head, but certainly, taking time in meetings. I don't know about you guys, but I've really missed the kind of, having biscuits in the office, even if it was someone's birthday or a celebration or even Christmas. How can we do that virtually and have that water cooler type check-in? And hopefully your takeaway from today that, if with tiny little things, little things can help to contribute. Maybe it's a biscuit, maybe it's a cup of tea, or sending somebody something in the post, who knows, but they can help to bring each other together. Your kids keep asking questions. Maybe that's a reference to homeschooling. I'm not quite sure. I might need to ask Brian to elaborate on this one. And I just love this. This is slide that I'm going to finish on before we have another quick break and then welcome back our leadership panel to bring the day to a summary. Think big, but we know we can start small, and we know that all of the most important journeys have to start with a single step. So that's a lovely metaphor for that. So I'm just going to enable everyone just to, for a very last moment, stretch those legs, grab a cuppa, and in a few short moments, we will be back. Also, don't forget that you are able to go onto our website. And not only are the resources there, but also our feedback form is there. And if you complete our feedback form, we'll be sending you out a digital badge. So away from me for a couple of minutes, and we will be right back just before 1 o'clock, ready for our leadership panel. Keep the comments coming, and we look forward to hearing from you some more. Okay, everyone, we've just got a minute before we start our leadership panel. And I think it would be a great opportunity for Paul to come back in and just start to bring things to a close. Hi, Paul, how are you? You've been watching with interest and thinking about spaghetti, I see.
We're all really confused here why that wasn't a fantastic business opportunity. Investigation in Glasgow.
Yeah, that's quite funny. Alan's left a lovely comment here. Great visuals, Brian. Yeah, we're really appreciative of what you've done there. They're just absolutely fantastic, and I can see that they are going to be resources that we can all use, whether it's posters or more postcards. So we're going to bring David and the panel on in a mere moment. Is there anything else that you want to share with everybody? It has been such a great day.
Yeah, I think one of the things that the project team, the colleges, you and me talked about, Louise, was for any event, whether you attend in person or virtual, as you click on that button or walk through that door, you think, is this for me? You know, am I the right person? Am I the sort of target audience, if you like? And I would hope that regardless of whether you're a SME, a large company, an agency or organisation that supports SMEs, you would have found value in the sessions today. I did. I was really excited, very confident about the quality of the sessions, how engaging they are, and how practical they are. That you can take things away from them. And what we've talked about as a partnership is the eventually the jump-off point. It's the start of the journey. So I would again want participants to think and encourage them to contact ourselves so they can find out more about a design sprint or how to embed a culture of innovation, or find out more about the funding, advice and support that's available, not just through this project, but other things that both ourselves, UHI, Forth Valley College and other stakeholders are doing. So it's hugely exciting, and I think you can just see through the comments page that people have been very engaged. So it's a great starting point.
Absolutely. The day up so that we've got all of these sessions actually in the sessions so that people can watch them on criticalengineer.netflix. We can't say Netflix, I'm sure, but you'll get the gist. You can binge watch it all in one go, like I do with most of my Netflix programs. But we will be building on the website, so do keep in touch with us, and also don't forget to fill out your feedback form as well. So we are ready to invite David back in. David, and we're going to invite the presenters and the panel back in, and it would be great if we can capture some more thoughts. So we're going to I will just remove Paul, and we'll add in Alastair and Dr. Jacqueline, Gordon, Lynne, Jim, and Rob back onto the screen, and also Sean McDougall. It'd be lovely if we had everybody on the screen. I'm just going to remove myself and hand over to you.
Okay, thank you. Everyone, I hope, and I'm sure, looking at the comments, everyone's found that really stimulating. I'm recalling a comment that was once made after I did a session when someone said it was head busting, but in a good way, which I thought was a marvellous Scottish comment. So there's a lot there, and lots of information. I mean, what I was taking to me is we are going through this tricky time, but the kind of upbeat sense of people stepping up to the plate is really quite inspirational, and hopefully leaves us somewhere good for the future. So and starting this session in no particular order, and thanks everyone coming back, and thanks for everyone's inputs. I'm going to just ask everybody if they've got that one headline takeaway from what they've heard today. And around all of it, which I liked, was, and it was going through my head, hopefully like everybody else, exactly how you would use some of this learning and think about the next stage of saying this was more than just quite a nice, interesting chat. This is going to lead somewhere. So I don't know who wants to maybe kick off on that. If you don't volunteer, I'll pick something.
I'm happy to
Thanks, Jim.
To start, David, I think for me, one of the interesting elements was the user-focused section that we went through. I think for us at the Skills Academy, we had a certain approach that we were taking pre-COVID around the products that we were going to develop and offer. I think that we always realised that would be different by the time we come through this, because we've taken a different approach to things as we have this morning, for example. So I think getting back to that user-focused element around what is it SMEs in the manufacturing sector really need and not what we think we can give them. We need to just sharpen up on that, and I think that really brought that into focus for me. And just touching on the upskilling question, I think very, very interesting question from Billy. I think it is about reducing barriers where we can as SMEs and businesses to make that upskilling important. It probably becomes a cultural issue around this is what we do around here, but we can't ever get away from the fact there needs to be return on investment. But I think we have the ability nowadays to focus that upskilling such that it's not so broad, but it's really impactful to the business. And by doing that, that should show that the return on investment make upskilling a thing. And we're looking at, as we go forward with the Skills Academy, developing the personal learning clouds and the skills wallets to capture that upskilling.
Okay. Thanks, Jim. Anyone else want to give their kind of headline reflections and kind of what now? Sean?
Yeah, thanks. I'd be really interested to ask the questions about people's readiness for innovation. I'd like to ask them on a broader scale, maybe send out a questionnaire to the participants or the mailing list and try to actually quantify where they are and what help they need.
Yep, no, I think that's a useful suggestion, Sean. I'm sure take a note of it, and Paul and Louise and colleagues will get onto it. Anyone else? Headline thoughts? Lynne? Lynne?
Yeah, thanks, David. I mean, you asked about sort of what's the takeaway for the future. The future is something that we're talking to our customers much more about than maybe normal at this point in time, and we try and think in three planning horizons: short, medium, and long term. You know, where your short term is what are we doing today to be efficient, to deliver on time, on budget, to stay in business for most companies. That's the key, right now focus. We think about the long term as, who will we be someday? What's the company vision? What's the 15-year, view of what we'll be doing? But the tricky part is that terrible medium term bit. That's what do we need to do between today, staying in business, being efficient and effective, and that long term view. Yeah. And for a lot of companies, it always feels it's always imperative to focus on today, and it's always safe to focus on someday. But actually, what I'm taking away from today is the role that meta skills have to play, and particularly in problem solving and in strategic thinking approaches, to unlock for most companies how you might deal with that tricky medium term. What are the options and how do you down select them? That's a perfect example of the design thinking that we've heard about. And just taking action to get you from today to your long-term plan, that's the embodiment of think big, start small. And for the idea that just companies can learn and upskill their teams so they feel confident dealing with that tricky middle, that's a really uplifting takeaway for from today for me, and great to hear the speakers with so many practical suggestions how to do it.
Thanks very much. And I just noticed, I think there's an interesting point from Angel Jackson: involve all levels in the business. And that comes through, I think, a lot. Rob?
Yeah, thanks. I think for me, a really useful sort of combination this morning of practical skills or practical tools that can be applied in a business of any size, actually, but also that emphasis around cultural change. That I think Billy's point is particularly acute. That actually there's a massive confidence issue here for either organisations or for individual employees or leaders within those organisations about having the confidence to say, this is where I would like to go, and these are the barriers that I need to overcome to take me forward as an individual or the organisation forward. And I think there's such a tendency to actually, I've lived in Glasgow for over 30 years now, and there is definitely, I don't know if others will back me up on this, but there's definitely a cultural thing here about not wanting to advance oneself for the sake of being seen to be, blowing my own trumpet or waving a flag for me. So empowering people to make those contributions actually is a massive cultural challenge, but it's essential if people are to make an organisation to make progress.
Yeah, thanks, Robin. I think that issue you're touching on, certainly, having lived here pretty much all my life, I think is right. This idea that you get too big for your boots, that you have an idea and step up for something. Jacqueline, you any? Oh, sorry, Alastair, I'll come to you and then come to you maybe next, Jacqueline, if that's okay. Alastair.
It was just, it was Sean's example of asking about asking the kids and the cleaning the toilets. There's Lynne. It always starts with like, what's the value for your customer? And sometimes people are scared to ask their customer because they're worried what they would say. And it's like, well, if you have that attitude, they won't be your customer for that long. But also, your customers are within your business, who you work with on a day-to-day basis. What work are you giving them? How can you improve what you give to them? And it's amazing that feedback that you get is. And it all just starts with asking the right questions at the right time. And I think that's what's came out. And it's about how you ask those questions to people to elicit that good conversation.
Yeah, thanks for that, Alison. You're absolutely right. Jacqueline, any headline thoughts at the end of all of this?
I think it's been inspiring, and I think well done, and thanks to all the speakers and all the contributions. What I take is that even the smallest changes can have big impact, whether that's the school toilets. Also picking up Billy's point, I agree as well. Upskilling is not a weakness. I think it's a willingness to step up. And you're right, I think there's a cultural change there. And I think that what this morning brings is practical tools to overcome the fear of change and bring this on and bring more of these sessions on. It's been great. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Gordon, I think you're left of some of the people I can see on screen. Any headline thoughts?
I think just going back to the earlier question, I think all three presentations had this message of just begin. Nobody needs to be an expert to try to start doing things and feel your way into a process. So I think the message in all three presentations was just begin to involve yourself with the process, and you'll soon find the way forward with it.
Yeah. No, I think that's a very good point, Gordon, and I think you're absolutely right. I mean, what I liked about the presentations, apart from overall their content and their delivery was excellent, was the number of times it just come back to something very real. I did realise I'm obviously much more positive with IKEA than a lot of other folk, but that's another matter. And that is certainly a household debate I have as well. Fair to say I've never gone alone. I think the important thing, and I think what's been really helpful about today is in 3 hours how much we've covered, how positive people have been about saying, yeah, we're in a difficult place, but here's ideas, here's ways, here's really accessible ways that we can get into stuff and move forward, be that COVID, beyond, and whatever, and that uncertain period that we certainly face for. Hopefully not as long as some predict us, but we don't know. And I think then the important kind of message to leave, which has been all the way through this is the beginning. I mean, I'm quite sure people, certainly I know I reflected a lot during the time. I'm sure I'll reflect a lot over the next 24 hours. Have some great question that I wish I'd asked, like everybody else. But this kind of coming together. The other thing folk I think talked about a lot today was keeping people up, keeping people mentally resilient. And for me, I think events like this do that. I think they contribute to that process of sharing ideas in a positive way, and knowing to some extent we're all in the same boat as we try and move through all of this. The other final thought I had was a food theme that seemed to come out that I didn't anticipate. And then I saw a great comment about culture eats strategy, which was a brilliant way of continuing that theme. I've never heard that phrase before. I don't know if it's original. And in addition to a biscuit, I was actually wondering if we should end with a final poll, which is, mixed spaghetti or IKEA meatballs. And everyone would have to come down on one side of that, which I put my hand up, I've already given my hand away here, it's IKEA meatballs for me. But that, I suppose I know we're pretty much on our time, but people's sense of how do we stop this not just being, oh, that was quite a good few hours, and that's it, it's over. How do we keep the momentum going? Anyone get any final headlines on that? And Louise will be interested to join at that point, because it does, and people will know when you go on the website, there's some tremendous resources there. But resources are only as good as people using them.
David, if I can just comment briefly on that, I think in the National Manufacturing Institute context, I'd just like to say to the audience that are joining us from the company base today in particular, we are continuing throughout COVID to deliver the type of research and consultancy projects for individual companies or collaborative groups that might help to develop and move their manufacturing operations and processes forward. We're also focused on knowledge exchange, workforce development, the meta skills that we've learned more about today, and the type of problem solving has to be supplementing the technical content from both from the business and in terms of manufacturing technology. We're here for today's audience. If anybody wishes to reach out, then happy to do that via the comments, or either you can look at our website at nmis.scot, and we'd love to talk to you about how we might help you put some of your newfound meta skills into practice in business improvement.
Oh.
Sorry, David.
David, we can't hear you.
But it looked very passionate. That's...
Oh, we've lost David. Okay, so I think, are you back, David? No, we've lost your sound. Okay. Well, in that case, then, I think that what we'll do is we'll bring things to a close. We did say we'd finish by about 12:15. So on behalf of myself, and I'm just going to invite Paul back in because I think he should have the final words. Paul, you must be amazingly proud of this event today and how it's evolved and the quality of what you've seen today. And that final picture that I've just put on the slide from Brian, which has just been discussed by everyone on the panel, it's let's keep things going.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that picture looks like my heart rate last week when we were talking about it. But I mean, I think the engagement's been fantastic. I think we always were excited about the quality of the presenters and the value that they could offer, and slightly different perspectives from those, and slightly different insights than perhaps we've heard in Scotland. I just want to touch on Rob's point about that sort of Scottish perspective of we don't want to sort of blow our own trumpet. I certainly feel, or I've had experience in speaking to yourself and Ben Rouse and Ben Whittaker south of the border, that actually we're a bit ahead of the game in Scotland, and they're a real opportunity in terms of building a learning network. So to start to answer that question that David posed before we sort of lost contact with him, this is just the beginning of that journey. I get a real sense of being able to build a network between our college partners and also those businesses, and I hope that they feel enthused to reach out to us. None of us have a full solution to this. We're all sort of navigating this, but together I think we can do some really exciting things. And what we'd also want to convey is that there are resources there is funding, there is free training available, there are learning assets and materials that we have developed to date and we will continue to develop, and we want to share them with you. So we'll make that effort to keep in touch with you all.
Okay. So just a final thank you. Can I thank everybody that has joined us today? Today wouldn't have felt the same without your contribution, and I don't have to wish you safe journeys home unless you are in the office, of course, but I do hope that you've enjoyed today, you've got something from it. Please fill out the feedback form. We need this to make sure that we can support any feedback with further applications that we do to continue to enable the project to continue. So a big thank you, and take care everyone, and we look forward to seeing you at the next event soon. Take care. Bye bye.